So basically, there's going to be a couple things that we're doing here, which I just find to be interesting. Background for me, so I've competed for Rhodes College mock trial, generally considered to be one of the best mock trial teams in the nation. I competed for them for 4 years in undergrad, and then I coached for them for several years after that. I'm going to be going through this. I'll be making comments about arguments and whether they line up with my understanding of the relevant subjects as we go. But I'm going to be keeping track of like how I grade them on a piece of paper. And essentially the things that I look for, and I think that this is true for people of like in any public speaking capacity, there's usually two main qualities that people look for in terms of whether or not people agree with someone. And it's actually not whether or not the people are factually correct in what they say, unfortunately. Because most people in society are not like pure arbiters of truth, you know, and that everyone isn't like very like logical in the way that they think. The things that people normally look for are whether they like someone and whether they personally believe that someone is credible, right? Those are usually the two things that they value. Not necessarily whether or not someone is right, but whether or not they look like they're right, and then just whether or not they personally like the person. So usually I do like a score of 10 in total, and then it's like 5 possible points for likability, 5 possible points for credibility. I'm just going to be writing out my paper because I otherwise don't have room. But yeah, that's basically how I'm going to be going through this, kind of like keeping track, right? Like I'll basically be in a position where I'll be at times acknowledging like whether someone is correct on an issue based on, you know, what I know about the relevant subject matter. Versus like whether or not it looks like they know what they're talking about, because those are two really big differences, you know? So yeah. With that, let's get into it.
Yeah, okay. So the first point is, I think that Destiny has just been watching my stream because I've obviously spoken to Dylan. I've spoken to what do you call it?
Yeah, no, he's watching your stream. Oh, here's the funny thing. Here, so. No, you can't rem the bath boy. I have no desire to talk with you. If Chud wants to bring you in, I'll fucking be out because I think you're like legitimately like not okay to engage with. I don't want to engage with you at all. I don't feel like you're an honest or good person. Actually, no, you know what? Bring this motherfucker on if you want to. If you want fucking fresh blood, bring it on.
If you want to come on, I'll take a completely unbiased stage and I'll moderate the discussion. Happy to do that. Yeah. Drop me
we're starting off.
I could drop you a friend request, Rem. Whichever way you want to do it.
This is going to be interesting.
Chud space logic. #4200. That's my. Oh, sorry, 4200. That's my Discord.
RGR, what does that mean that you can be wrong but still be perceived as correct in debate? Is this is better thing or just how it comes off to the audience? I'm not trying to be like prescriptive with that. I'm just saying that like to me, as a fundamental, as like an advocacy matter, I think it is important that you are advocating for things that are correct. I think that is fundamentally what is most important. But if you put in all the work to figure out the arguments that are the best, but then it doesn't look like to people that you're trying to convince that you in fact know what you're talking about, then it doesn't really help you that much, right? And also, like, as far as me giving a grade for how this goes over to both parties, if I just go based off of what I think is correct, there's always a chance I could be wrong. Now, I would say that I put in a lot of work to make sure that I've done everything I reasonably could to make sure I'm not wrong. But I'd rather base it off of how I think the average person would receive these arguments, because ultimately that's what's more important, right? Like, if someone who doesn't really know that much, if anything, about this subject, believe someone even if they're wrong, you know, like, then that speaks to their ability to be able to communicate something, you know? That's kind of the idea. Like, it is fundamentally important to make sure that you have the right ideas, but it's also just as, if not, or it's not more important, but it's just as important to make sure that you're also able to communicate those ideas in a way where people will believe you to your audience, you know? I mean, this is the reason why, like, a lot of political pundits are really popular, right? Is because a lot of them don't have good arguments. They're actually wrong, but they look like they know what they're saying to the average person who doesn't know any better, right? That's the whole reason why Ben Shapiro is prominent. And so the way that you defeat people like Ben Shapiro is by showing the audience that they actually don't know what they're talking about. You have to expose them that they don't know what they talk about. So correctness is good for substance, but your image or rhetoric is good for moving people to your position. Yeah, because I mean, like, for me as an advocate, that's what's most important, or not most important. It's most important that I know that my positions, to the best of my ability, are correct. And then it's just as important to make sure I'm able to actually move people to my position, right? Those are both important things.
And I'll add you to the chat. Okay, yeah, sure. Because you know, the one thing I wanted to get to, I mean, obviously this is kind of going off on this tangent now.
Look, you can actually watch this happening in chat right now. That's like, no, you know what? Okay, fine. I'll fucking talk to this motherfucker. And then chat is simultaneously struggling to figure out whether am I a coward who's too afraid to engage with Rem, or am I an insane flip-flopper who does whatever. No, you know what? I don't want to engage with this guy, but I'm going to do it. Because here we are. We got fucking 300 people watching. So let's do it. Let's fucking talk it out. I don't even know what this guy's problem is. He just randomly added me this morning. This is such a fucking weirdo. Like what is this? What is this behavior? I don't
right
know.
now she's got like a 1 in terms of likability.
With any other streamer. I haven't even had this issue with fucking like right-wingers. I don't have this weird issue.
Wait, what weird issue?
Destiny is watching this stream is because
what weird issue? The issue that someone wants to talk to you? I mean, you can refuse to not talk to someone. Like, I refuse to talk to people who I think are just, who I think are generally assholes or who are looking to harm me. But like, this is a pretty over-the-top reaction.
Destiny is so motherfucking obsessed with me. It's unbelievable. And no matter how long I go without talking about him, he eventually will at me or bring me up or send a bunch of people my way. It's endless.
When's the last time that Destiny like added demonmama? Does this happen?
But let's bring him in. Let's bring him in. Let's fucking sort it.
Okay. Sorry. Chat.
Is that a thing that happens? That I mean, like, maybe I just don't see it. I don't see that happen that often.
And,
maybe it does.
I'll add him to the call, and we'll go from there, I guess. So yeah.
Sure.
Kind of yikes statement considering that Rem's autism, but she probably. Oh shit.
There we go.
Yeah, just a little cringe.
Okay, so I sent you a friend request, Rem. Oh damn! Well, this is spicing up a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, but watch the spice level go down when the insufferable Rem walks in here and starts going, oh well, technically my wording.
I'm giving her a 0 for likability. She's starting from so deep in the hole. Hey, Socks.
Rem?
Doesn't he hate demonmama? I don't know.
Who the fuck is Rem? Good question.
Okay.
I only know. Listen, all right. Here's what I know about Rem. All right, I've had like 2 interactions, kind of, with Rem. During the Eat the Rich saga, you all remember when I was saying like, hey, maybe we shouldn't dog whistle causing mass violence against people who have wealth. That doesn't seem like a good thing. It seems like the same kind of thing that people on the far right do. And a lot of people on Twitter like lynched me over it. Then I said, okay, I don't want to interact with any socialists if this is how you're going to act. Now I can look back on that and I could realize like, okay, that was an overly broad statement. And I've like tried to make amends with some people who identify as socialists who I don't think like fall into those dangerous tendencies. But during that time, Rem was like, I can't remember exactly what he said. I remember he tweeted something like specifically mean about me during that period. And so since I was like block happy, I blocked him. I've actually been like keeping an eye out for people who I blocked during that time to see like, you know, I'm always like reflecting like if I act reasonably. So I'm always like, all right, maybe I actually was like too unreasonable with Rem. Or with other people, you know, and I'll like look at messages from people who I blocked and like I'll unblock people if I'm like, okay, actually I feel like I overreacted. Probably should unblock this person. It seems like they're actually probably like altogether pretty reasonable. But then I looked to Rem's Twitter and he was just like shit talking like the short that I did the other day about what is gender part 4 for like no reason. Or he didn't give a specific reason. He was like, oh, this is so fucking terrible. And he didn't like explain why. So I was like, oh, nope, this was a good block. I don't have any problem with this guy, but he seems to just be an asshole to me, so I'm just not gonna interact with him. And that was it. Oh fuck. Ren uses they then. Okay, or Ren doesn't go by that. Wait, so he goes. Okay, so I'm gonna assume that he goes by he him. Okay. Non-binary he him. Gotcha. But yeah, so like that's the reason. So like that's all that I know about Rem. And otherwise, it sounds like he's like there are people in my community who say that he's pretty decently well read on like philosophy. I know he talked to Destiny the other night, and he seemed like reasonable. So I don't know why he has such an issue with me. But yeah, so it's like I'm not gonna interact with him. But like, you know, this seems like a really big overreaction. So yeah, I don't know.
Rem, hello,
Good
welcome.
afternoon.
Wait, no, stop. Wait.
Wow.
Okay, this is my show.
Mama, holy shit.
Wait, no. Come on, please. Let's just settle down a bit. Hello, Rem, welcome. How are you doing?
Jed Logic's being cool.
Nice. Oh, sorry, I think I was muted. Yeah, no, I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Right, so there's some contention here.
Why's
You
my
wanted to
game
come on
so
and defend what you were calling lies from Demon Mama. I'm friends with Demon Mama to lay my cards on the table. I do have a bias here, but I'll do my best to kind of, you know, moderate as fairly as I can. I'm kind of going to let you go at each other, but if it gets a bit too much, I'll try and interject. If you have any problem with the level of moderating or you think I'm not doing enough, by all means let me know, and I'll do my best to do better. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Is there anyone want to speak first in regards to this, or what's the deal?
Well, I mean, I don't actually know if Demon Mama really knows a lot about me. I mean, you called me a Destiny toady, but if I'm known for anything online, if I'm known for anything online, it is me going into Destiny's stream and calling him a dumbass for various reasons. That's basically my whole.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
So I know this is just like a small aside. I notice a lot of people doing this. Like, oh, there's a ton of people where as soon as I started like talking to Destiny and like associating with him more, that it's like a switch goes off and suddenly everyone is like, anytime Destiny is brought up, I'm immediately brought up alongside him, right? It's super fucking weird. It's as if like, oh, if you don't like call Destiny like an evil fascist terrible fucking person or whatever, then you must therefore always be associated with him on every single thing he ever fucking says or does. Which is super weird. Yeah, I don't know.
You just sit there and getting hit by the guy and you go, oh, I'm sorry. And then you come back again like Dobby from fucking Harry Potter. Yeah, I don't know. I just think you're a toady.
Well, can you give me a single instance of where I've done that and try to like beg?
Rem is starting from like a very likable position, and Demon Mama is still like a fucking zero.
So why go on stream and lie about me and call me something that I'm not?
No, because I wasn't lying. I was giving my genuine impression about you. I think you are a toady.
But I would never go on someone's stream and.
Excuse me. I was talking. I think that the way that you engage online, I've literally never seen you mentioned in anything ever that doesn't involve Destiny. You just seem to float around him and occasionally quit Twitch and then occasionally come back and start drama. And then you randomly
taking cheap jabs at Destiny is just free clout. Yeah, it seems to be the case.
When I've never expressed any interest in talking to you. Today you tag.
It's interesting that there's like a whole industry of people, like of Twitch streamers that popped up just as Destiny hate streams. There's just like a whole industry of that. Which, you know, he's not infallible. If you want to criticize him, it's fine. But it's just like, there's some people where it's like, it goes beyond just like criticizing his views. It's like a really unhealthy like obsession with him. Yeah, I don't know.
Tag me because apparently, let me just get the
Destiny is a proud job creator.
Bring this up. I think I just retweeted this. Hold on, let me just bring this up and I'll give everybody in the chat.
So I think it's silly to say, like, I have an impression that you're transphobic, but I don't have any evidence, so I wouldn't say that, you know?
I've got the tweet, okay? Here we go. And let me just, I'm gonna do a funny voice for dramatic effect. Please don't be too offended, okay? Interesting that the usual actors haven't said anything about the very detailed, nuanced discussion with gender that, about gender with Omniliberal and Howarth Lewis that was had last night, even though you know they watched. Perhaps it's because they know what was said was right. Demon Mama in particular. So first of all, let me just give you.
Hey, I watched some of that. Yeah, I might talk to Destiny later about it because again, like I feel like a lot of the questions that they had left over, I think Rem disagrees with this. Again, I don't know what his problem with me is, but yeah, I thought it was like the conversation itself seemed fine.
Give you a little. Let's do a quick fact check because I know
don't
you're
appreciate the voice.
Yeah. Okay. Look. Okay. Let's keep the voices to a minimum. Let's keep the voices to a minimum. Okay.
Yeah. Like I'm calm. Let's just have a call.
Talk with a friend. I was here talking with a friend about a completely unrelated situation.
All right. So here's the thing. All right. I'm gonna give Rem still like a 4 on likability. So again, like 0 out of 5 for likability, 0 out of 5 on credibility. I can't give Rem the 5 because like the quote itself like does make him come across as an asshole. Maybe everyone is just an asshole on Twitter. I don't know. But otherwise, like insofar as how he's talking right now, he sounds like very amicable.
You wedge yourself in here. You're getting what you deserve. You want to come on here and be a fucking dickhead? You want to fucking
said that I could come on, and I had an issue with something you said because you lied about me.
Dude, just spine the fuck up. Wait a minute, hold on. Spine the fuck up. You were being toxic as shit, randomly tagging me in as the usual actors.
It's not toxic. I see someone who I think is transphobic on Twitch, and I want to call them out on it.
This is you. Oh, you think I'm transphobic? Interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super funny. I would say
that I would love to have a discussion with you about it, but I know you're too weaselly and you're not willing to actually have a discussion.
I don't want to have.
Holy fuck!
You can't defend your takes. You can't defend your transphobic takes. I agree.
Okay, fine. You want to say that? Let's do it right now then.
Okay, let's have a detailed discussion.
Let's have a conversation about transphobia. Let's hear you lay out your argument for why I'm transphobic. I would love to do that. Let's fucking test your fucking lies.
I believe that the way that you go about you essentially before we do that.
My god, literally already?
Whoa. No. Let Rem speak. Let Rem speak.
What did he do? All right, let's hear why you're transphobic. Rem, well, I think that generally, demonmama, whoa! Like, what did he do? Like, he just opened his mouth. Did he say something? Did I miss something in there? He stumbled a little bit with his words. He didn't answer quick enough. Is that really it? I'm sorry, did he say, like, something... Did he say something really weird that I just missed? Like, it sounds like he was just like trying to find his words, and then she was like, she like flipped out for him finding his words. Why is my games going so slow? Fuck. I'm sorry, people who are here for the ESO stream. Obviously, this is the real reason why you are here. I'm sorry that I can't give you the perfect ESO experience that you all are asking for, or that you all deserve. Answer was longer than 140 characters. Yeah. Oh, great. Oh. Keep going.
Come on,
conversation with you. Why don't you give your take to begin with, so that we start from the same foundation, so we can actually
Hold on a second. Wait, are you for real? You just walked into this conversation and accused me of being transphobic and said that I would not be able to defend my take, and you don't even know what my take is?
I do know what your
Okay, hold on. You can ask someone to establish what their belief is. That doesn't mean that you don't know what it is. It's just like a way to clarify so you both are on the same page. Like, I think it's perfectly okay to be able to ask someone like what their belief is to make sure that, you know, you and they are... So like, it's actually like a more ethical thing to do, because that way you're not like responding to something that they don't actually believe, you know? Like... it's a good thing to do. Like, you should, like, if you're talking to someone about a complex subject, then you should ask them, like, all right, just to be clear, so we know where we're starting from, can you tell me what you believe on this thing?
Take is, but maybe you've changed it since. My impression is that you said you can identify as whatever you want. Do you agree or do you disagree with that?
This motherfucker will go on Twitter and be like, oh, how nice, the usual actors don't show up.
I'm trying to ask questions.
Right. Let's just take a step back. Let's take a step back, everyone, okay? So, right, here we go. This is what we're going to do. Rem, if you can repeat the question, and demonmama, if I can just ask for you to answer it.
Yeah, either...
This is actually pretty good.
Either demonmama can give their own take, which I think is probably the most reasonable way to go about doing this, or I can give my impression of what the take is. And based on what you have said and what other people I have seen said who you are friends with,
Yeah, this is literally debate tactics, TM.
of identifying as anything you want. And I believe just for whatever reason, it doesn't have to come from an intrinsic sort of draw towards a certain type of set of gender roles and gender performances, but instead,
you can also Pixie, I'm in the stream chat if you want to join.
And I think that this lends credence. Well, first of all, that's ridiculous, and I think that lends credence to the idea that actually you're harming trans people by putting these arguments out there that make trans people look worse in the eyes of people who are not as well educated on the topic.
I would say that her arguments are transphobic, but not. I have like a much more specific reason. I don't think that like it's that you should generally like I think that's like fine. So I'm not gonna like dox him as far, because I think that like to the average person who doesn't know as much about this subject, like that makes sense. I try not to focus primarily on like the problem is that like when we're talking about something which I would make out to be like an intrinsic quality, right? Like I make out gender to be an intrinsic quality, like that there's something that is psychological. There's like a psychological aspect that is beyond your own choosing, right? So going back to like Julia Serrano's intrinsic inclination theory, that like we all have some kind of, or like I shouldn't say all, that most of us have some kind of like subjective experience which predisposes us towards certain kind of gendered behaviors or over others, right? The term that I use here, which seems to be the best term for this idea, or like the one that kind of fits, right, is like to call this a qualia, which is something which is entirely experiential. I have a TikTok kind of talking about this idea, but essentially it's kind of like you can think of these kinds of inclinations in the same way we think about like pain, taste, love, or color, which is like it's really hard to actually define what those are without referencing something else in society or measuring it against something else, you know? But most of us experience these things. And for those of us who don't, we usually define those people in reference to the fact that they don't have the same kind of experiences as most people, right? So for example, like most people can perceive color, but some people can't. So we would call those people colorblind, right? Similarly, most people seem to have intrinsic gendered inclinations, which predispose them in general towards the categories of like man and woman. But some people don't. They don't have those intrinsic inclinations. So we would call them non-binary. But like, notice how it's defined in reference to the binary, right? It's like most people have these intrinsic experiences, but some people don't, and that's fine. So we could have like a category for those people who don't have those experiences, just like we have the category of colorblind for the people who don't experience color. Yeah, and so like, I'm sorry, I was monologuing for a second. I don't know. That's going to become more relevant as we go on.
So, sorry, can you restate what you think my take is?
Oh yeah.
You have.
And so like, and so as far as like why I don't really focus on how trans people would be accepted by general society. Like I don't want to make it purely an appeal to that. Like I focus much more on like the fact that trans people have this quality that goes beyond their own choosing. And so it's like, you know, it might be unpopular for a large part of society, but like in the same way where it was at one point unpopular to give black people rights, well, it's like you don't choose to be black, so we need to like shift society's understanding of this thing. Just like you don't choose gender or these internal inclinations, you know, then the goal is to move society in such a way where we could make room for these people. That's kind of it's like a small thing here. I'm not gonna dox Rem for it, but like, you know, just like elaborate on that idea.
Said multiple times that you, like, for example, you think it's possible to identify as a deer, for example, right?
No.
You don't. So you actually believe that someone like the dope person I can't remember their name.
I'm sorry.
You
if
don't
you're talking
think
about doe does not identify as a deer. See, this is the thing.
No. I asked, and they actually said that you identify as a deer.
Excuse me.
Wait a second.
Did you?
Hold on. Something is not right. Something is amiss. Something does not feel right here.
What would be the problem?
Oh, come on.
What would be the problem with dear gender? Can anybody tell me if there would be a problem with dear gender? Is there anybody who could even do this? There would be nothing wrong with dear gender. Do you want to know why there would be no problem with dear gender? Because gender is a category of self-identification that means what you want it to mean. And it means what you engage. It refers to how you engage socially and how you assert your own identity. So, yeah, it is fair to say that gender is essentially an aesthetic. There is nothing less valid about dear gender than there is about non-binary gender.
So something is not right here. Just a heads up, this dope person gets on after this discourse, and they confirm that they didn't actually identify as a deer person. They confirmed it was just a whole meme the whole time and Destiny misconstrued. Okay, well then if they don't identify it, then that's fine. But like, Demon Mama is defending the straw man then, or whatever we want to call it, right? So we're responding to that. But like, I don't know, like, something is not right here, right? like this is something sus. Something has happened here, or something is happening here, because these two clips do not square with each other, you know? But yeah, I'm pretty, like, just to preface it, because I'm pretty sure from what I've been told that eventually Demon Mama clarifies that she doesn't think that, like, so since she takes gender to be like an aesthetic, then people can identify as like a deer for aesthetic purposes. But the reason why this is transphobic is then she must necessarily conclude that, like, oh, well, someone who identifies as deer gender isn't actually a deer. Then you extend that to trans women and men and non-binary people. It's like, oh, you aren't actually a woman. You aren't actually a man. You aren't actually non-binary. You're just aesthetically those things, right? That'll be the reason I say what she says is transphobic, because it's like, it is actually like, it's actually like second wave feminist logic. Just to summarize, like, second wave feminism, if you take it like super steel, man, this is what like the super hardcore TERFs will argue. They argue that first, gender is socially constructed, but the only thing that is real is biological sex. So therefore, we should get rid of gender and just have categories in society be based on biological sex, right? And this is either very close to or that exact same argument, which is saying that, oh, you know, I'm aesthetically a woman, but I'm not actually a woman, you know, or in this case, this would be what Demon Mama's argument would lead to. In the same way that second wave feminists would argue that. Yeah. But yeah, that's why I would say that her logic is transphobic. I'm sure we'll get into that again, but that's kind of like the summary.
Did you want an answer to the question, or did you just want to stumble over your own words when you realize you don't even know the basics of what you're talking
Where did
about?
I
First
stumble?
of all, O doesn't identify as a deer. If you had engaged with this entire situation in any sort of good faith, which of course you and your fucking, again, your little...
all right, hold on, the clip earlier, I need to know when she said it, because it's either she said that before or after, but like, it is absolutely not unreasonable to say that like, that is what her argument is. Because like it seems to be the case. Like I don't know. I maybe there's some magical, like, very specific nuance that I missed in the clip that we watched, but it seems to be the case that she thinks that deer gender is valid. Maybe I'm missing like some specific nuance, but it really doesn't seem like a stretch to say that, like, no, that is what she believes. Oh yeah, no. Well, that's all right. So I would disagree with Rem there, right? Like, I would say that, like, I mean, I'm not sure insofar as it relates to sex. Like, again, I focus on like these intrinsic inclinations, right? Because like, it is the broad scientific consensus. And when I say that, like, there's an actual statement of academic consensus, right? So I'm not just saying like, oh, you know, I have a couple studies and that they all happen to affirm my position. Like, no, there's an actual statement of academic consensus that gender is an intrinsic quality that's beyond your own choosing, you know? So it's like, it's really hard to look at that in the face and to say that, like, that doesn't matter. Secondary, even most primary sex characteristics are mutable, and chromosomal sex has its own nuances. That doesn't really relate to what we're talking about.
Crowd of clowns never engage with these
What's
things
my crowd of
seriously.
clowns?
Your crowd of clowns is all of the fucking DGG idiots who are like, you think you can identify as a deer without actually knowing whether that's the case. Now, first of all, no, Doe does not identify as a deer. No, I don't think that people can identify as a deer, whatever that even means. Can people identify with it? Can people say, yeah, I love this fucking aesthetic. I like identify with deers. Yeah, people do that shit all the time. I identify with a demon. You identify with a fucking bath boy apparently. Are you
No,
bath boy sexual, them? Are you?
That's not gender. What? By this logic, what is goth gender? If I identify as goth, is that now gender? Like, the things that she's eliciting are not genders, you know? Like, generally, genders are categories of people that carry expectations of performance and how society treats them. But, like, and we can also get into, like, a lot of other particulars about, like, what generally gender entails, but, like, these things are not generally accepted as, like, parts of gender. No, I want goth gender. Riley, gender is aesthetic. I don't know if you're being... I don't know if you're being, like, jovial here or not. But yeah, like, these things are... aesthetic is not gender. Yeah.
You bath boy sexual? This is what you sound like. This is what people sound like when they when you engage like this.
Let's let Rem respond.
What? I don't even know what that means. Am I bad boy sexual?
It's a refusal.
Oh, you're meaning? Okay.
Listen.
Let's let Rem get a word in.
So you yell at me for interrupting you, but every single time I start to speak, you interrupt me. So, Chud, can we just make sure that if I'm speaking, that Demon Mama doesn't interrupt me, because we are not actually going to have any sort of
let's what we'll try and do is let each person.
This is a reasonable ask.
I'm not going to set any hard time limits. Let each person have a bit of time to speak, and we'll go from there. So, Rem, we're going to give you a couple of minutes to say what you need to say, and we'll continue.
Yeah, perfect. So my impression, and I even said this on stream last night, is I've been getting very conflicting things. I've literally seen, how do I refer to them? Doe, is that the name that they go by? Doe?
Yeah, they use it. Yeah, it's pronounced. Yeah, they.
Okay.
I believe on its profile it says it they.
Okay, so okay, that's interesting to me. So they go by it they, but they don't identify as a deer. They identify as what then?
Person, a trans woman, like
they're a trans woman. I'm asking.
Doe has said this many times. Like, literally, this is one of the things that really gets annoying. So let me just explain something. You came in here calling me a transphobe, and now you've dialed back to say,
wait, there's a real question that's being asked there. Like, why is Demon Mama, like, pivoting away from this question? Like, this is a real question that demands an answer.
well, you've gotten conflicting opinions, but you were willing to walk in here and boldly declare me as a transphobe.
Oh, because I've literally seen.
Wait, I'm not done. Not done. You just did an interruption there.
Sorry, I apologize.
Okay, continue, Demon Mama, then you can respond, Rem.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
wait, she's gonna get on him for interrupting?
Basing your argument off of another person that we're talking about here, okay? And you don't even know what they identify as. You don't know what that person identifies as.
First off, that's not necessarily established, right? Like, he's asking you to clarify, because you said, Demon Mama said, oh, well, people who are deer gender don't actually identify as deers. And it seems to be it seems to be the situation where it's like Demon Mama, where it's like Doe doesn't actually identify as a deer, but Demon Mama, I think, thinks that they do. That's my impression right now, given, like, the clip that we watched earlier. It seems to be the case that Demon Mama, like, believes that they identify as a deer. And so, like, if they believe that Doe identifies as a deer, and then someone asks, like, okay, so if they don't identify as a deer, then what do they identify as? And, like, Demon Mama has kind of, like, laid out the set of principles that, could, that demand an answer, you know? So it's weird to like avoid that right now.
You don't even know. So do you see how infuriating this is? The reason why I get angry is because you come in calling me a transphobe and you now have admitted that you actually don't know what my position is.
Secondly, I don't think this is the reason that she's mad.
You base your argument off of a human being w's received a fuckload of harassment because of people like you, and also you don't even know what they identify as. This
don't
is
even know.
A basic level of dishonest, stupid debate bro inhumanity. It's so fucking annoying.
Okay, Rem.
So can we
You're such a fucking debate bro. You're such a fucking debate bro for asking questions.
Right, Rem, if you go ahead and respond to that then.
Yeah.
Such a fucking debate bro.
So why don't you just go ahead and actually state what your and also I just want to say I asked you what the identifier
mad in the audience now. He's still mad in the audience.
Okay, wait. Let Rem respond.
Wait, what's this argument that's going on in chat? You just got on her, to be fair? No. I don't think that's fair at all. I wish there was a better way to format the debates. Listen, Rem came in and specifically asked for like a more formal discussion, and D-Mama like jumped down his throat. Like, no.
Let Rem respond. Rem, ignore that.
Just I'm trying to talk, and I'd appreciate you to stop interrupting me. I don't really care what's happening in the chat. I'm here to talk to you. Why don't you just give me as simply or as complicated as you want what your views are on gender and how gender identity plays a role in the lives of transgender people, and whether, for example, you think that it is something. I'd like to see if you think that it's something innate to someone, whether it's a social construction. If it is a social construction, is this something that can be arbitrarily defined by any individual, or is there actually something that all trans people experience in the same way?
I don't think that there is any single universally shared experience between all trans people. I think that's ridiculous, and that's been something that's been discussed in trans activist spaces for a very long time. With regard to gender is a social construct. It is an identity that we can declare. Gender is indeed arbitrary. That doesn't mean that it's random. It just means that it is hugely variant depending on current social standards, through behavior. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into what we come up with as gender. What I advocate for is that the most coherent way of understanding gender is to understand gender as a social construct, that it doesn't actually really tie, because it doesn't. The way we use gender in our day-to-day lives doesn't tie back to sex at all. It doesn't tie back to any sort of intrinsic thing. And I think it's absurd to try and force that. So I believe that gender is defined by people's declaration of identity. And yeah, do I think that somebody wants to call, if they want to call themselves dear gender, if we're going to invent a person, mind you, just so we know, we're inventing a person here. This isn't a person that we've actually engaged with. But if somebody wants to identify as dear gender and they have a reason for that, and they have a genuine belief in that, I think it's perfectly just. They're not making a claim that they are a biological deer. No one's ever made that claim. I don't think anybody would make that claim.
Of course.
And if they did, well, okay, that's a different claim. But if you're talking about gender, gender is totally arbitrary. We have fucking millions of terms for gender, and that's a good.
All right, hold on. There's a lot going on here. We have to deconstruct some of this. Fuck. Okay, so first off, God, where the fuck do we begin? All right, so first, like, to go to the end, like, we'll start there, because that's probably the most reasonable. The idea that, like, so she said that, like, oh, so when someone identifies as deer, so, like, first off, she does affirm that, like, deer gender is a thing, right? Like, so she is agreeing that, like, deer gender is a thing. So, like, it was bad of her to, like, jump down Rem's throat and say, like, oh, you know, do you think that this is, do you believe that this is a real thing? And then for her to turn around and be like, no, of course I don't think that's a real thing. How dare you possibly suggest that? Like, no, you do. Like, don't skirt away from that. You just admitted that you think it is. You just have, like, more nuance to what you believe. Now, again, this is where the really bad aspect of this take comes out, right? Because she says, like, now do I think that someone is, like, actually a deer when they identify as a deer? Like, no, of course not. Like, here, she does have to concede that if we let people identify as anything, then you have to concede that the thing that they identify as, especially for things like animals, that they are not actually those things. And so now, if we take this back to gender, the necessary extension is, oh, so if you identify as a woman, you're not actually saying that you're a woman. You're saying that you're aesthetically a woman, which is really bad. Now, beyond that, the other idea that like, oh, gender is like a really amalgamous thing with a lot of different characteristics that is socially constructed, but since we can't find one defining quality, then that must mean we just must abolish it. I did a short on this recently, or like a couple, talking about this concept where there are lots of concepts in our society where we don't actually have necessary or sufficient criteria to define them, and we understand them in something more akin to like a family resemblance model, right? That seems to be the way that we understand a lot of concepts in society. So for example, when we're defining something like, what is a game? What is a chair? What is a car? If you actually try to like find some necessary or sufficient criteria which is able to include every single thing that is a chair or a game or a car, and excludes or and doesn't include anything that is not one of these things, you find that it's basically impossible. But that doesn't mean that these things, that we're suddenly throwing these characteristics or these ideas just completely out, right? That doesn't mean that we're about to become like game abolitionists or game... God damn, why is my game so slow? That doesn't mean we're about to become game abolition. Maybe I'll become a game abolitionist. This game doesn't fucking speed up. Doesn't mean that we don't become like game abolitionists or like chair abolitionists or car abolitionists because we can't figure out exactly like what the unifying qualities are, because like everyone uses these terms in society and there's some shared understanding of what these terms mean. Usually the way that that people understand these concepts, though, isn't through like some very specific necessary or sufficient criteria, but usually by just having like some idea of what these things are in their head based on their exposure to similar things over the course of their life. And then they measure other things against like whatever their idea is of the thing that they're measuring it against, whatever that mental image is in their head, right? So with that, we're able to accurately capture the societal meaning of, oh my God, game, what the fuck? We're able to accurately capture like the social meaning of gender. I'm gonna lose my mind. That most people have without like excluding anyone, right? That's the benefit of a family resemblance model, which seems to be consistent with how we address other similar concepts. There's something else in there I was gonna say, but yeah, that's like the main idea. Oh, hey, Pixie.
Hi. So would it be helpful if I stopped and explained xenogender and mogai stuff to you really quick?
Oh yeah, sure, go for it.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with either of those terms.
I looked into xenogender when people were like, oh, Riley doesn't know what the fuck xenogender is. And then I looked and it's like, oh, this is a 2014 Tumblr term. That's great.
Yeah. It has basically like, so it calls into question like what we consider to be gender versus any other personality trait, and just tries to engender any random trait of preference, such as like, you know, the extent to which one could identify with an aesthetic like goth or deer or anything else. And it's like, okay, I'm going to call this gender. That's why you get like, you know, star gender and angel gender and all like the, you know, the 2010 Tumblr stuff. And that kind of the whole movement faded. And I actually linked a video in chat earlier. So look at sometime, maybe on stream. It's like a 40-minute video, but it's a really good video essay about how basically like it, you know, people did grow out of it because they got to a point where it's like everyone was kind of reflecting on all of their personality traits and everything about themselves, and then like making each little thing into a gender. And they got to a point where like they all kind of grew up and realized like, well, this isn't necessarily like useful. You know, this can still be my personality trait, but when we're calling everything gender, all we've done is made like when everything is gender, then nothing is, you know? And that's why the kind of it eventually collapsed into back to the mainstream understanding that gender really is in reference to these social constructed categories of masculine and feminine. That's why you have, you know, like man, woman, both, neither, kind of, sometimes changes. And then things outside that kind of like, yeah, like these are personality traits, but if we're calling this gender, like there's not really much utility there and it's hard to communicate anything.
Yeah.
And we're basically seeing another wave of that here, where you get people saying like, unironically, you can identify as an attack helicopter if you feel that is metaphorically representing something about yourself.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, even like xenogender stuff is actually contingent upon trying to find some metaphorical way to explain or express something about an aspect of yourself and like your personality and your mind, basically. So even that kind of goes against Mama's take that it's just whatever you want it to be. You can like make up anything for any reason. It's like even then, like the entire what limited utility xenogender stuff has is trying to
like
still
capture
express something through metaphor and like reference.
Yeah, like trying to capture something else that's like
an
aspect
so, like,
of your psychology.
Yeah, if someone identifies with kind of like passive like wisdom and kind of thoughtfulness, like we have like Athena, who's like a strategy goddess, and like owls are kind of got associated with that in ancient Greece, even though it's not like true to literal owls. Like there's kind of a socially constructed notion of what owls represent there. Someone could identify like with that and they'll be describing something that'd be cool, but it's like, why call that gender? That's kind of like how Mogai fell apart eventually, where it's like, what's the point in calling this gender? Can't this just be a personality trait? Because like, it just kind of question like, well, why do we consider these things gender? Why don't we consider other things gender? And it's like, yeah, that is like a good question, like masculinity, femininity as categories, but we have to limit it to a category. Otherwise, if gender is just literally anything you want, like just say personality.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it completely arose from Tumblr, Mary McCheese, but it was definitely big there. Like that was like, in Tumblr's heyday. Like you got all this is like the feminist SJW trans people that everyone like made fun of, and like why people took so long to come around on like trans and LGBT acceptance is because there are people associating being trans or anything like that, or like even other sexualities with like, so you identify as an attack helicopter. That's where it came from. It was making fun of that because it sounded absurd and like irrelevant and kind of useless.
Yeah, the problem is that like I think that I was reading something earlier. Basically, like the problem is that like when people originally started raising, so it was like a lot of conservatives who don't understand trans issues started raising like, oh, so you're saying you can identify as an attack helicopter. The response that we made at the time was, oh, that's ridiculous. No one would ever say or argue that or do that, and I don't think that we actually kind of like got into the nuances of like why you couldn't do that. We just kind of like hand waved that criticism away as like, oh, well, no one is doing that. Well, now people are doing that and we haven't, and a lot of people haven't like thought through why that doesn't work out.
I literally Googled like Mogai genders and I just found like the Tumblr search results. And this is the kind of stuff that comes up, right? Where it's like people trying to metaphorically represent something about themselves, but it's like, there's no point in calling this gender. And stuff like, here's a post, roller coaster genders. Coaster gender, a gender related to roller coasters, where one's gender has highs and lows and feels very fast. Can also have restraints, stopping it from feeling too intense, or inversions, making it feel far more intense for a short amount of time. There's a variant called kitty coaster gender. So it's like, it's whatever they're describing could absolutely be like some metaphorical representation of like some thought process they're going through. But it's like, what's the point in calling this gender? Like, is this really in the same category as like man and woman, like in terms of traits it's describing?
Yeah.
It's like, my eye color is applesauce, and it's like, well, I mean, I could like applesauce and I could have an eye color, but it's like, I don't know. It's weird to like, because something is a social construct, you can just substitute whatever in for it. And it's like, it's just making the idea of a category less useful.
Yeah.
Really, all this could just be like a separate category.
Right. I mean, like, what was I saying? Yeah, so basically, like, I think that a lot of this comes from, and I want to get back to reviewing the video, otherwise it's going to be like a 3 or 4 hour review. I think that a lot of problem is that, like, people, like, so step 1, deconstruct what gender is. Understand that it's not just biological sex, which is good. Like step 1, deconstruct it, take a really hard look at it. That's like a good thing to do. But then step 2, people don't know how to like put it back together. Like whatever they've deconstructed, they don't know how to like kind of reassemble it into something that makes sense. And so step 3, they just like, oh, well, we can't reassemble it. We've broken it. We can't figure out how to put it back together. So it just means whatever we wanted to, or nothing, or both. But yeah, like you can't really like, as kind of like a logical matter, just because you deconstruct something and say that it's not one thing, that doesn't actually establish necessarily that it is another thing, Like just because we can say that like not every single trans person is not like a binary man or a woman, does not necessitate that they are a deer or something, That's like light years away from making that kind of connection.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway, I'll get back to playing it.
Good thing. It helps people explain themselves, express themselves better and more freely and more happily. There's no reason why we should have
this
to
just
try and
sounds
force
like
this idea that there's
this
some
just
sort of
sounds like a
there's
aesthetic,
nothing
but
more intrinsic
that's not gender.
to your gender than there is to your name. Gender is there's no difference. Somebody and we treat it the same way. If somebody walks up to you and says, "Hey,"
wait, hold on. I'm sorry, we're pausing again. Gender is different from name. A name is like an identifier, but like a gender is like a category of persons. You know, like there's a meaningful difference between like the fact that like I say that, oh, my name is Riley, compared to me saying like, oh, I am a woman, because there's going to be like very different connotations for how you expect me to act and how society is going to treat me based on those two different declarations, right? Where I say I am Riley, that doesn't really carry anything necessarily with it unless it's very particular to my person, you know? But if you say that you're a woman, that carries a lot of expectation for performance in a lot of ways that society treats you, you know?
Yeah. But to these people, they look at women in terms of like what is necessary and sufficient criteria for womanhood, looking at the full variety of what women can be. And therefore, they assume it must be equally meaningless because the only absolute consistency is also the label of woman. So therefore, it's just as meaningless as name. That's the logic.
Yeah.
But that's why we have some family resemblance. Like, you know, it does vary between cultures and like even like subcultures and time and place, but you're still referencing some idea.
Yeah.
Hey, my name is Johnny. And you don't go, actually, can I see your true name paperwork? I want to make sure you're not actually a Fred. You just call them Johnny. There's no reason to do it any other way. So there's my actual take.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, I mean, this is essentially what I said, is you can identify as anything. So you can be deer gender. You could also equally be attack helicopter gender based on what you're saying, because there's nothing intrinsic to these things. Excuse me.
Wait, so Demon Mama does think you can just identify as an attack helicopter. Or does she not? I don't know if she's like making a jab or not. I can't tell if she's like, I don't know, I'm not going to read too much into it. I am at the point now where I can't tell if this is like her making fun of him or if it's like, oh yeah, no, thank you for agreeing with me. RGR, it was a gotcha. But like a gotcha in what sense? Where it's like the mama like actually agrees with that, or where like she's like, oh, well, you're absurd. I believe the nice was sarcastic. Okay, I can't really tell.
Let's finish speaking and then we'll respond. So go ahead,
and you can correct if you disagree with anything I've said. Feel free, point that out when I finish speaking. So you said that you can be deer gender. Obviously, you're saying they're not identifying as an actual biological deer. That doesn't make any sense. Obviously, I totally agree with you on that. So if they're not identifying with anything biological about the deer, I'm not entirely sure then what they would be identifying with if they are deer gender. So
why don't you ask
hold
them?
on.
Why don't you ask them?
And then you can answer. And then you've also said some things that I think are conflicting with each other. So you're saying that there's nothing intrinsic about gender. You're saying that gender is arbitrary. I mean, these are words that have very specific meanings, and a lot of them they're not coherent with each other. So when you say something is arbitrary, that means like you can't at the same time say that it's socially constructed and very real, because that means that it has been constructed by society and there are a set of norms and guidelines that people in society participate in, and that's what we mean by behaving like a woman or performing as a woman. You're recognizing the real social dimension of these gender roles. So that inherently means that they're not arbitrary. In fact, they're completely tied to the way that hold on. They're completely tied to the way in which people present themselves within society. Or else, when you say that I'm a woman but don't identify at all with any of the very socially real performances that people who call themselves women partake in society, then they're actually not a woman. They've just completely redefined a term and are being bad faith actors in a conversation. Or maybe not bad faith, but they're just not aware of the way that language plays a role in our discussion.
I couldn't disagree with you more. The expression of womanhood is so broad that you...
Oh, to Nick DeRose in chat. The Strength of Social Contract, because I read the book by Foucault, History of Sexuality, Part 1. Is that a social construct is basically only as real insofar as the power behind it. So that's like number of people but also kind of multiplied by their institutional power to communicate and spread that. Yeah, so like what these logists are arguing for right now is this kind of idea to like, well, social constructs are restrictive, it can be anything you want it to be, and they're basically arguing for the freedom of everyone to fully define terminology of themselves, which like technically sure people could do, but once everyone is just like using all words their own way entirely, then you've kind of destroyed communication as a concept, because it's just not particularly useful.
Yeah. That's all I have to say about that. Anyway, all right, I think we're good. Let's keep going.
This is essentially what I said, is you can identify as anything. So you can be deer gender. You could also equally be attacked helicopter gender based on what you're saying, because there's nothing intrinsic to these things. Excuse me, I'm talking.
Let's
I let you
finish
speak,
speaking and then we'll respond. So go ahead,
and you can correct, if you disagree with anything I've said, feel free, point that out when I finish speaking. So you said that you can be deer gender. Obviously, you're saying they're not identifying as an actual biological deer. That doesn't make any sense. Obviously, I totally agree with you on that. So if they're not identifying with anything biological about the deer, I'm not entirely sure then what they would be identifying with if they are deer gender. So that's hold on. Let me finish and then you can answer. And then you've also said some things that I think are conflicting with each other. So you're saying that there's nothing intrinsic about gender. You're saying
I think Rem is being very professional right now.
I mean, these are words that have very specific meanings, and a lot of them they're not coherent with each other. So when you say something is arbitrary, that means like you can't at the same time say that it's socially constructed and very real, because that means that it has been constructed by society and there are a set of norms and guidelines that people in society participate in. And that's what we mean by behaving like a woman or performing as a woman. You're recognizing the real social dimension of these gender roles. So that inherently means that they're not arbitrary. In fact, they're completely tied to the way that, hold on. They're completely tied to the way in which people present themselves within society. Or else, when you say that I'm a woman, but don't identify at all with any of the very socially real performances that people who call themselves women partake in society, then they're actually not a woman. They've just completely redefined a term and are being bad faith actors in a conversation. Or maybe not bad faith, but they're just not aware of the way that language plays a role in our discussion.
I couldn't disagree with you more. The expression of womanhood is so broad that you can't even fathom it. There are so many different types of people who think of themselves as women, and guess what? That's fine, because women is something you can declare as a self-identity, the same way as a name. You couldn't
all right, I think we talked about this before, but again, like just because like a term is broad and you can't necessarily think of necessary sufficient criteria, that does not mean, oh, well, it just means nothing. That just means that we have to think of a different model for understanding those ideas. Like, it does not necessitate that, like, because you have a broad term and because you can't think of necessary sufficient criteria, that it's meaningless. Like, in the same way that we would say, like, oh, just because you can't think of necessary sufficient criteria for what a game is or for what a chair is or for what a car is, it doesn't mean that those terms are meaningless. Like, they're broadly understood within society to mean something.
Define a John as anything other than somebody who calls themselves John, and that is the same thing for woman. Now, you could say that, oh yeah, there's like, in history, a woman was understood to be this, but this was an incomplete definition. This is, or it was at this point understood to be this. We see this all the time with gender. In fact, the reason
hey chat, let me know if the video is echoing.
This type of an approach, and by the way, this is an approach that is like, this is not like I'm just pulling this out of nowhere. This is queer theory. This is the stuff that people talk about when they say, wait a minute, the way that we have understood gender in the past is that it's essentially been used replaceably with sex, but not actually super accurate. So we come up with a coherent definition of gender that says, wait a second. In truth, there are people who see themselves as women who don't match up to what you might ask, like, I don't know, you ask a Christian what a woman is, they might have a totally different answer. And I know they would have a totally different answer than if I asked you.
But there'd still be a lot of overlapping similarity, right? Like, if we were to have someone like Samantha Lux, where it's like a lot of conservative Christians would not call her a woman, she still is going to like they have to do a lot of backflips in their head to avoid the conclusion that like, oh, she basically looks and performs and we treat her exactly the way that we do with other women in society. And there's a lot of overlap there, right? Like to say that you don't have the exact same understanding doesn't mean that like there isn't some overlap that still exists there.
You ask, et cetera, et cetera. This is arbitrary. These things are determined by an almost incomprehensibly large number of factors, and what a woman is incredibly difficult to define. So it doesn't make sense to try and say, oh yeah, well, you know, let's measure the number of woman points this person has before we consider them a woman, when everybody considers woman to be something different, just the same way that every single person considers John.
Everyone doesn't consider a woman to be different. Like the whole point is that there's broad averages in society where most people understand this category to be the same. Like, here's an example. Let's say that someone asks me what my gender is, and I tell them I identify as a bling blong. All right, that's what my gender is. I identify as a bling blong. Most people, now if you're super hyper woke on the internet, you're probably still going to be like, oh yeah, no, that's totally hecking valid. But if I ask you to like picture in your head what a bling blong is, you have no fucking idea. The point, the whole point of the hypothetical is to point out that you have no idea what this term means, right? Or what this category of gender would mean. Whereas if I ask you to think of like, okay, I identify as a woman, and then I ask you to like think of what a woman is, like everyone's going to have like some general idea of what a woman is, right? There's some general everyone has like some idea of like what a prototypical woman or a man or even what a non-binary person is, more so nowadays. Again, socially constructed ideas. Cool, poggers. But the reason why you're able to think of something, why something comes to your head, is because like there is meaning that's attached there, right? Like when I say I identify as a woman, that means more than if I say that I identify as a bling blong. And if you want to say that gender is all self-ID, then you're saying that there is no functional difference between saying that I identify as a bling blong and saying I identify as a woman. Which I don't think any reasonable person ever would agree with. I would normally say no one within the LGBT community. Most people, I think I would still say most reasonable people within the LGBT community wouldn't agree with that. And as well as in broader society.
On to be something different. You can't, just like you can't define what a woman is outside of being an identifier, you can't identify what a name is outside of an identifier. That's the thing. That's all that I've ever been saying about this. Now, if you want to talk, hold on, there's another thing that I want to address that you brought up. These are complicated topics, so you'll have to pardon me talking a little bit if you want my genuine takes. But let's talk about another one. You brought up this idea that people can identify as whatever they want. Sure, they can, but you have to analyze their claim. If somebody claims to be dear gender and they're engaging, I think there's no reason to assume that anybody would engage in bad faith, and even if they were, there's no harm. So I don't really even need to.
Wait, no one would engage in bad faith? That's what Steven Crowder does, right? Like that's the whole point of Steven Crowder, like going to what do you call it? Going to Planet Fitness and like dressing up as a woman and say, aha, well, I identify as a woman, so you have to treat me as a woman. Like, no, we would still look at Steven Crowder and acknowledge like, okay, you're full of shit. But the reason why is because like we wouldn't just look at Steven Crowder and be like, oh, well, you're identifying as a woman, so, you know, you're totally hecking valid. Like the reason why there is because like we know with certainty that that person is lying. And that they don't actually have these intrinsic inclinations which predispose them towards certain gender behavior, right? He did that? Yeah, no, totally. It was like a really big thing, right? But yeah, there's absolutely people who engage in this in bad faith.
I don't really need to consider whether they're engaging in bad faith because there's no harm even if they were. If somebody comes up and says, hi, I'm a dear gender, you know what my first question is? Oh, cool. My first question is I would just get to know them as a person. But if we were going to be specifically talking about gender,
it's just like moralizing it. It's like, and they might say, you know what I'm gonna do first? I'm gonna ask them who they are as a person. I'm gonna bake them a plate of cookies. I'm gonna make them feel super hecking warm and safe and like it's just like moralizing it to make it seem like she's nicer, and therefore if she's nicer, well that must mean she's more correcter.
Well, you know, gender is really complicated for me, and I feel like the way that I express my gender is best.
I will say that
expressed by,
she's
like,
more
a
likable if she
deer-like
says that,
aesthetic.
but I don't think that
Okay,
makes her any more
cool.
correct.
That's perfectly fine. No harm, no foul. Nobody's hurt by this. So I don't understand what the problem would be. Now, if somebody walked up and said, "Hi, I am biologically a deer, and I'm going to go eat this poisonous plant," I would go, just so you know, you don't have a deer's intestines. It's probably going to hurt you. But nobody's making that claim. I've never met anybody who makes the claim to
Oh, you know, they're not saying that they're actually a deer. They're saying that they identify aesthetically as a deer. Like, fam, I don't know what to tell you. Take this to its natural conclusion, then trans people aren't actually the gender that they identify with. They're just aesthetically that gender. Like, this is second wave feminist bullshit. That's what it is.
To me, that's a good reason why, like, xenogender stuff as a way of, like, metaphorically describing any aspects of personality and preference do seem useful, but a poor thing to put on the same level in the same category as gender, because it's not something you're metaphorically like, it's something you actually are.
Yeah, like, we don't want to, like,
the rules just don't consistently apply between these two things.
Yeah, like, you're describing like two completely different phenomena.
Biologically a deer. They just have a theory of gender that's slightly different than yours, and you've decided to declare that transphobic.
Okay, so
it is
first of all, I'm
transphobic.
glad
It's
that you're acknowledging
1000%.
that screaming at me when I basically identified your take correctly, which is that you can identify as anything. I'm really unsure why you were screaming at me, mocking me.
I was screaming at you.
Hold on, excuse me, I'm talking. Did I interrupt you? I
Wait.
did not interrupt you. Thank you, Demon Mama.
Wait, did you all hear that? Oh, I was screaming at you because I don't respect you. So if you don't respect someone, then that's excuse enough to be able to scream at someone? I don't know, fam. Like, because it's not in respect to whether or not what he's saying is right. It's a matter of whether or not, oh, you know, if I don't like someone, then I can just scream at them. It's not great.
I don't know why you were screaming at me and yelling at me when I said, you asked, oh, what do you think my take is? Oh, that you can identify as anything. You screamed and said, that's totally wrong. You don't know. Hell, excuse me, Demon Mama. I am talking. I respected you when you talk. Now please respect me when I'm talking.
I like how Chud Logic is handling this.
So I'm glad that I'd hope that you can acknowledge that you were being dishonest there. So that's that point. There's a few different things. Thank you for responding in detail about these things. So first of all, you were talking about women and the identity of being a woman and how so many different people from so many different groups identify as a woman in ways that seem very distinct from one another. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. Your example about a Christian woman, how they see womanhood is going to be very different than a trans woman. That's 100% correct. However, just because there's differences in what they consider themselves to be a woman does not mean that all of a sudden it's up for grabs and it's all anarchy and women can mean whatever the hell you want. There is going to be overlap between what a conservative woman views herself as and what a trans woman sees themselves as. And this just follows from the very nature of language itself. You kept appealing to, you know, names as being somehow an analog for gender identity. It's just a known fact in philosophy of language, and I can link you. I'd love to hear some of your stuff in queer theory, and I can send you some stuff in philosophy of language. There's a very clear difference between.
I'm gonna put this out there. I don't think that Demon Mama has read any queer theory. I mean, this is just a guess, but like, considering that, like, I don't know, like Pixie, we've read a decent amount of queer theory. Like, I don't know, I feel like none of her arguments really match up to anything we've been reading, but maybe there's some other theory that exists out there that I just haven't been exposed to.
Hey, I would like to read more. I've reached out to, I have a butch friend who's super into like butch culture, and she just given me like a reading list. I need to get around to it. I've been so busy this week.
Yeah, no, that'd be cool. I'm just saying that like Rem is like asking her. Maybe it's like a rhetorical thing that he's doing here, but I don't think that Demon Mama is gonna give him any. That's my suspicion. Is I don't think that she's gonna give him any literature.
To be honest, all the reference to queer theory I've heard from these kinds of people has been stuff mentioned in the ContraPoints video.
Yep.
But never talked about again by the people with the same understanding as if they read it.
Yep. Yeah. 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 Anyway.
Proper names, you know, a signifier for someone like Rem the Bath Boy, that's a signifier. That's not a concept. It's just a way of pointing me out in the world. That's very different from a concept like womanhood. It's the same thing like being red. Red is something to describe an object, right? In the same way, excuse me, please, you keep interrupting me. Let me get through this and then you can respond. You can point to me and say, hey, he really likes baths, right? He being, you know, also part of my identity, or actually I'm non-binary, so it can be whatever. I don't really care what pronouns you use. But there's a distinction here between a proper name and a concept. So your analogy to like being John it's not at all the same thing as being gender. That just doesn't make much sense. And finally, you know, if you are actually, if you've listened to me or you're familiar with my positions, you might not be, and that's okay. I'm a scientific anti-realist. I mean, I don't think that gender and sex have any connection whatsoever to each other. 100%.
Yes and no. I mean, again, it seems really... Hold on, let me just, like, pull this up. I mean, like, Julia Serrano is great to read for this purpose, but, let me pull this up really quick. Have this shit on speed dial. We is not... All right. Declaration of the impropriety and dangers of sexual orientation and gender identity change efforts. We, as national organizations representing millions of licensed medical and mental health professionals, educators, and advocates, come together to express our professional and scientific consensus on the impropriety, inefficacy, and detriments of practices that seek to change a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, commonly referred to as conversion therapy. We reiterate the prevailing science, confirming that variations in sexual orientation and gender identity represent normal expressions of human diversity and cannot be changed at will. Like, to say that gender has no relation, like, that it's not in any way biologically informed or really I don't know, maybe Rem would agree that, like, it's in some way biologically informed. But, like, to say that it's not an intrinsic quality, that there isn't some kind of, as Julia Serrano would put it, intrinsic inclinations which motivate your gender expressions, like, it seems to leave out a lot of our information about how gender works, because if we didn't have these inclinations, then there's no reason that conversion therapy wouldn't work for some people if it was done, like, in, I guess, like, an ethical way. Again, like, I reject the idea that conversion therapy can be done at all in any ethical way, because gender is an intrinsic quality. But it seems really reductive to not include this information in your understanding of it.
So we can totally drop all of that stuff. I don't think that's Hold on, please. We can completely drop all this connection between gender and sex. We don't need to talk about that anymore. We don't need to appeal to like deers and intestines or whatever.
It's in my doc. There's links everywhere.
Our difference
or like links to all the relevant citations in my doc.
As a socially real
or docs,
construct,
plural.
Womanhood, manhood, etc., partake in an active, dynamic process in the world that has real meaning. And this meaning is not arbitrary. It is ever changing. It's not static. It is certainly not constant.
I think this
is
true.
It doesn't have a real meaning in the world. And if someone wants to just come along, for example, myself, you know, I identify as non-binary. If I were to tomorrow to say, oh, well, I'm a woman, but I can't actually point to anything in the world that matches on to the societal usage of the word woman, then it's not that I'm technically wrong. It just means that I'm using a word in an incorrect fashion. So if I'm having
I might not say incorrect. I would just say that you're not using it in the way that everyone else would. Just for like a frame of context, this is kind of where I like bringing in like concepts, like legal concepts, because there's a decent concept in the law that kind of captures what we're talking about, right? It's this idea of like what an average reasonable person would believe. You know, so like that's kind of how we would suss out like, you know, what is the meaning of gender? Well, you know, it's the overlap in how the average reasonable person generally perceives of this thing in society, right? And the same way that like a chair generally takes on the meaning that inhabits the same overlap of understanding between the average reasonable person in a given social space. So like with this kind of person, like what he's describing, where it's like someone is using woman in a way that like just the vast majority of society isn't, we would call that person like an unreasonable person in comparison, right? Insofar as they're just using a term. And that doesn't necessarily mean that like it's per se the wrong way, but like it's just a way to acknowledge that most people in society are using it one way and you are in the minority.
Having a conversation with someone who also identifies as a woman, and I'm saying that I am a woman, even though we both know that I'm really not, the onus is going to be on me to explain how it is that I'm using the word woman in a way that no one else is. Because when we talk to each other, we have to recognize that the words we mean have meaning. And to be proper interlocutors with each other, we have to recognize that they have shared meaning. And that applies equally well for gender roles like womanhood and manhood.
Okay, so what you've just said here is that you just made a couple of what I believe to be contradictory claims. So you said that you could declare yourself as a woman tomorrow, and that you wouldn't act, even though everyone would know that you aren't actually a woman. That you would therefore.
I love the average reasonable person standard, but I think most people don't really understand what it means when it's used, and that's often used incorrectly and misinterpreted. Yeah, I think that often people misunderstand it. I tried to the best of my ability to explain and clarify what I mean when people don't understand it. But yeah, I think it's really useful. I think it helps us a lot with these kind of discussions. So it is one of the better or best ways that I have found to talk through these issues. And also like it's pretty well validated. Like, I don't know, it's how juries work. It's the exact same way juries work. It's one of the best ways that we have at our disposal for sussing out, what these socially constructed things mean, right? Like it's very useful.
Say it, but you would be wrong. How can you be wrong about that? How can you be wrong about what
yeah,
a woman
here
is? If
I wouldn't have said wrong.
And woman is a category that is declared, that is decided by society's engagement. I am a part of society, and my declaration of womanhood, if there is no biological, which you've admitted that you are, and by the way, I will remind you that you were the one who made an appeal to deers and to attack helicopters, and also accused me of transphobia at the beginning of this, even though now you're saying that people who claim they're women aren't actually women, unless society says that, unless society agrees with them. But keep in mind that
I'm not, well, you said that, I think that Rem did have the wrong wording here, so like there's some penalty on him for not being clear. But I think that like it is just descriptively accurate to say that like if you try to use this idea of woman as like pure self-ID, you're just, as a factual matter, like taking out the moralizing or whatever of it, all of it, that you're just using it completely differently than the vast majority of people in society. Like that is just a matter of the fact.
That the people declaring womanhood are also a part of society. This is why it is a social construct, aka my position is what you sort of like said you don't agree with, but then you ultimately sort of restated back my position, which is that womanhood is a state that can be declared by anybody. And guess what?
I don't think he's ever
if
said
somebody
that.
declares womanhood as a part of society, as a part of everybody else, as a part of this societally constructed definition, guess what? The definition of womanhood just expanded to include that person. You might not like it. A lot of people might not like it, but it did.
Again, this depends on, like, this is why I like the average reasonable person standard, because like in that case we would probably say that like that person is just unreasonable. Like that's how, or at least like if it's just so far departed, like you can move the average reasonable person's understanding of something. Like again, like I've talked about this before, this is the reason I really like the trans activists out there, like the women with beards and all that, because they do expand the definition, like the average reasonable person's understanding of what gender is, right? Like they are socially constructed, but just because they're socially constructed does not mean that there's not meaning there. And those meanings can change over time. But, if you just start one day saying, oh, a woman to me is anyone who identifies as a woman or something else, which is incredibly departed from how it's used by most people in society, then you're not moving society's understanding of it just by doing that. You have to put work into that. You have to make that happen.
Because that's how these things work. And guess what?
It's not how these things work.
we shouldn't give a shit about that. That people should be able to say, yeah, I'm a woman. And it doesn't matter if they have a beard. It doesn't matter if they use he, him pronouns even. That they should be able to say, I'm a woman, because we recognize that this is a massively arbitrarily designed process that is mostly used to just control people's actions and say, you can't wear this, you can't do this, you can't talk like this, you can't identify like this. Okay. And you have yet to, appealing to this idea that there is like a true womanhood that exists somewhere, but then you actually don't actually believe.
I don't think that he's, hey, Pixie. Did he ever appeal to the idea that there's some kind of like true womanhood? I can't tell if she's like actually restating what his argument is.
I don't think so. And I think Rem is like easily, I mean, he even opposed any scientific basis whatsoever. Sorry, does Rem go by he or they?
No, he, it seems.
Okay. Yeah, maybe like kind of he, they. So it's like making an appeal to social constructivism for sure, but that there is some socially constructed, not necessarily, not objectively, not universally true, but some socially constructed, vague general idea of what womanhood is that of course can change based on context.
Yeah. Which seems to be like, that seems to line up pretty well with like what our argument would be, right? You know, like there is meaning out there. Just because it's socially constructed doesn't mean that there's no meaning, you know? Just that you need a different way to capture that if since we don't use necessary or sufficient criteria. At least that seems to be. So yeah, like I don't know. It doesn't seem like we're too far off. I don't know why he got like so bent out of shape over me on Twitter.
It was something about scientific anti-realism. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like he's probably like a perfectly good guy, and also I think he's mad at when you banned socialists on Twitter, which I do think like was an overreaction, but practical at the time when you were.
I kind of talked about that earlier. Yeah. I mean, like to summarize again, like yeah, I do think that I overreacted, but I've also been like unbanning because I did ban I did block like a lot of people who were actually like being incredibly harmful and like shitty. So I usually just keep my eye out nowadays for like people, you know, if I see someone talking about me and it's blocked account, then I'll like take a look at them and I'll like, you know, if they seem reasonable, then I'll unblock them. It's like, okay, you know, I may have overreacted with this person. But then when I heard that he wanted to talk to me, I went to his Twitter and it's like, nope, he's just shitting on me. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I hit that one on the head, pretty accurately early on. So I don't know what his problem is, but yeah.
Believe that. So you do have a contradiction in your position. And yet you came on here and called me a transphobe.
Okay, well, so let me just correct you. There's no contradiction. If you were listening to what I was saying that there is a very real existing meaning of these terms. They just happen not to be rooted in biological fact. The same thing with table. There's nothing intrinsically about the word table that refers to something that has 4 legs, is used to place things on or whatever. I mean, it's just a sound. Table. That's a sound, and as society, we have designated that table refers to something that has 4 legs or whatnot. That's how language works. Words gain their meaning based on use in society. So there's no there's no contradiction in what I'm saying because you still recognize that these terms develop over time in society. Yes, there could be a world where woman is actually being used as zebra is. So whenever we see that 4-footed mammal that has black and white stripes, I can say, oh, look, it's a woman. Yeah, of course that's a possibility. But the reality is, if I go up to someone at the zoo and I say, oh, wow, that's a really beautiful woman, they're going to look at me and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's a zebra. I mean, yeah, I could say, well, actually, when I say woman, I'm referring to something that has 4 legs and has black and white stripes. But that just makes me an asshole who isn't capable of having any sort of real conversation with someone. And it's the same thing for someone who wants to say that they identify, for example, me.
And Rem is delivering it very accessibly.
But I can't actually point to anything in the world that maps onto what anyone means as woman. That would make me an asshole who is not actually capable of having a real conversation with someone because it's irrational and it's being dishonest as an interlocutor. It's the same reason that I can't. Hold on, you keep cutting me.
Yeah, regardless of like any disagreements that Rem and I have, he looks like he absolutely knows what he's talking about here. So like if you have someone who doesn't know anything about gender or anything about this discourse and you place them in front of this conversation, Rem blew demonmama the fuck, at least so far. Maybe something changes. But Rem is handling it like he's very likable, and he looks like he knows what he's talking about.
Me off. I'm not cutting you off. I don't know. You yell a lot about people cutting you off, but you seem to do it more than anyone I've ever spoken to. You're doing it again somehow, even though I just pointed it out. It's the same thing if I were to go to, you know, a piece of bread and say, oh, wow, look, that's a dog. You know, it's not. I mean, dog in society has a certain meaning, and we can't just arbitrarily designate anything we want to be a dog. So that's really what my argument is. This does not mean that I don't think that manhood and womanhood have any real meaning. They have meaning in the same way that any words do in society, which is based on convention, based on the rules of language within a given language, whether that's English.
I'm glad that my
Spanish,
game is working now.
You know,
that makes me happy.
Indigenous people have different conceptions of gender identity. Their language is largely different from the English language, so they have more expanded scopes. And absolutely, in the future, womanhood could come to represent something different than it is now, but that does not go out and completely redefine words as they want.
Okay, so a couple of things that you have done here, and this is the same. I've had the same issue
that you've
with every
done.
single
Oh,
person
Lord.
that argues this. Do you want to know what the difference between somebody declaring, "I'm a woman. This is how I understand myself and see myself," and a table? There's a key difference. One of them has agency and a mind. The other one is an object. You were literally like.
DemonMama said this in my conversation. I really need someone to answer this question. How is that relevant at all? I'm sorry, I'm trying to be calm, but like, she says this as if this is like the smoking mirror gotcha. But we're talking about, like, the whole point right now is that we're talking about subjects which are socially constructed that don't have necessary sufficient criteria. It doesn't matter if they're objects or not. In the same way that if we talk about things like color or chairs or tables or whatever, these are socially constructed things which we seem to recognize broadly don't have necessary sufficient criteria. It doesn't matter. It seems irrelevant for you to say that, like, oh, well, those things just don't apply because they're objects. No, it's the same logical issue, right? Where it's, we have things that are largely socially constructed, and so, because they're socially constructed, we, at least with these things in particular, it seems to be the case that they have such a wider expanded meaning, but that we still all seem to have like a rough similar experience of. That it's not that they have no meaning, but we also can't use necessary sufficient criteria to define them, right? Like, that doesn't really matter insofar as you're referencing like an object or like a concept. Well, I mean, like, these are all concepts, right? Like, that's the whole point. But the problem is that, like, she's just kind of saying this right now as if it's like the smoking gun matter-of-fact thing that proves that, like, there's something to distinguish these concepts from gender when she hasn't laid that groundwork.
People, this is the definition of a dishonest interlocutor. See,
Oh,
you
God.
have to pivot to this idea
Now we're
of
going
how
to
we
the.
define a table or a deer.
Now we're going
talking about a
to.
social
Oh,
construct.
because you
It's
don't
not someone's
you don't
identity.
automatically agree
Someone
with
can
me,
stand up
then
and
you're
say,
dishonest.
I am a woman, and how can you tell them that they aren't when you don't even have a meaningful definition and you acknowledge that there is no objective definition of woman? You see, the difference is the agency.
Oh my God. I'm not going to keep repeating the same arguments. We've kind of been over them. But to summarize, and again, I don't know why, because he didn't seem to like my appeal to, like, Wittgenstein's family resemblance model, but, like, that's a way to be able to understand these concepts. That's a way to be able to understand concepts like what a chair is, or what a oh fuck, I'm about to be killed on here. What a chair is, or what a car is, or what a gender is, in such a way where you don't need to have necessary or sufficient criteria, right? It's a good way to kind of acknowledge everything that he's saying, without having to have like a single individual criteria. So I don't know why he got upset over my usage of that. But yeah, like, that's the response to what DemonMama is saying right now. But she's in full, like, do I want to say debate, bro? She's just looking to get dunks. She's not looking to actually engage with what he's saying. But that's pretty apparent to, like, everyone who's, or like the vast majority of people who are watching at this point.
A person can say, yes, I am a this
Oh,
is
sorry,
my
what?
experience.
like debate cis, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, like, I'm just saying debate bro, like, in a gender neutral way. Like, people sometimes refer to me as a debate bro. But yeah, like, whatever the term is, where it's like you don't actually care about engaging with the other person you're talking to or their ideas. You're just primarily concerned with trying to get a W on them. Oh, hey, Fat Zombie Pig boosted the server. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. But yeah, it's like she's not really, or I mean, like, she's listening insofar as she's just looking for like the easiest way to try and like get a optic win on him. But he's handling himself really well. So the good news is that, like, I think if you take like any random person and put them in front of this conversation, and like they had no idea who these two people were, they would look at Rem and be like, all right, this is clearly the reasonable person here.
I am dear gender, and I experience my gender to be, I visualize it and I understand it and I abstract it as attached to a gender. And they can do that because they're an agent. Now, they might not be able to make the biological claim that they are a deer, biological. Nobody does that. Again, this is a straw man, but they can do the same thing with womanhood.
Again, this is the bad outcome of her argument, right? It's like, oh, you're not saying that you're actually a deer. You're just saying that you're aesthetically a deer. Oh, you're not saying that you're actually a woman. You're just aesthetically a woman. Like, this is the reason why this argument is transphobic, people. Like, this is the reason, is because it supposes, if you take it to its end, that trans people are not actually the gender that they are identifying with, that they're just aesthetically those genders. Like, this is the reason why this is transphobic logic.
There is no difference between these things. And this is what
I hope that Rem picks up on that. Like, he just,
because we recognize that there is only
she just gave him like the golden goose. So I hope that he capitalizes on it.
We're going to leave people out who identify genuinely and earnestly as women, people who aren't hurting anyone. And yet you're going to say you're not a woman because hold on, let me consult the social often incoherent, often disagreeing summation of every single society and individuals.
I'm also just gonna say here, like, a lot, like, she's making out that, like, oh, genders are often incoherent and don't mean anything. Like, the vast majority of people in the world, like, how many people are cis compared to trans? Like, how many, like, what percentage of people in the world are cis? All right. You can't sit here and say that it's something completely incoherent that doesn't make any sense, and also say that, like, oh, you know, somehow everyone, like, just about everyone in the world is able to fit, like, pretty comfortably into these categories, you know? Like, that does not square. You can't say, oh, these make absolutely no sense, and then also sit there and say that, like, but on the other hand, just about everyone seems to be happy with them, you know?
Understanding of what a woman is. This is not like a table. We can agree on a table because a table doesn't have a mind of its own. A table doesn't talk back. You can't determine what somebody else's identity is. You don't get to do that.
Yeah, but
you
can't. Oh, sorry.
Hold on. This is like another philosophical issue. So I talked about this with Avi lately, and for people who want to go watch that conversation, that could be very useful. It's like my most recent, like, longer form video on my channel. This is like the difference between, I'm trying to remember, so the difference between ontology and epistemology, right? Pigs, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I got the right understanding. So it's like ontology is the study of being, whereas epistemology is kind of like the study of what is, you know? So, like, there's a difference ontologically versus epistemologically of, like, how do you determine like someone's gender. So, like, epistemologically, it doesn't really matter what we say as far as what gender is if we have, like, a really big weight on the mental component, because, like, since there's a really big weighing on what someone's gender is with the mental kind of intrinsic inclinations that people have, then ontologically, since we don't have mind readers, then we just take people at their word, you know? Like, if someone says that they are a gender, then for the most part, you know, unless someone is, like, identifying as deer gender, you know, but if someone says they're a man or a woman or non-binary, then you take them at their word generally. Or not generally. Like, for those categories, I can't think of an instance where you wouldn't. Unless it's, like, specifically known that they're lying, like with the Steven Crowder example. But, you know, like, there's a difference between, like, how you parse through these things ontologically versus epistemologically. And she's just conflating the two.
Do you want to say more? I didn't mean to.
RJ, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
No.
But then how can someone identify as a deer? Deers do not have agency. So I don't really understand. It seems to me that you actually have the contradiction here in saying that, well, anyone can identify as a woman because any woman has agency, but you also earlier said that you can identify as deer gender, but deers don't have agency. So I don't really understand.
You want me to
how
answer that question?
These two things. Yes.
Okay, let me answer that question for you, okay? Because like I said, the claim that somebody is making, and this is where it becomes apparent that you've never actually talked to somebody who uses like this type of neo-pronoun, or that you haven't engaged with the specific person that you were bragging on at the beginning.
Just a reference because it's relevant. So the video that you linked earlier is specifically a video talking about how this was really popular a couple years ago, and actually it's fallen out of style as people have realized that actually like using xenogenders doesn't really capture what is gender, so it doesn't make sense to use those categorizations.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just saying that, like, you know, when, like, Demon Mama is making this sort of appeal, like, oh, you've never actually talked to the people who are relevant to this conversation, when it's like, you know, it seems like this issue has already kind of been settled, you know, like, by people within the community.
Yeah, the video I linked is like really good and comfy. I like just remember because I followed it like many months ago and I liked it. It's like very comfy. It's very chill. It's kind of like a bunch of people. It's a very like 2016 BreadTube-esque kind of style of just kind of this like friendly laugh and like reflection on this time and like, oh yeah, no, this turned out to not be as useful. But it was just young people trying to like express themselves and understand themselves better.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, like, these conversations don't have to be like super over the top toxic, you know, like they don't.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that conversation can just kind of be like more chill and just kind of like, oh, well,
Yeah.
you know, we tried this, you know, like we don't have like, you know, gender inclinations that are typical for people in society. We tried to figure out like kind of the extent of what like gender means. And, you know, we came back and this is what we've learned, you know, like that can be a good experience. You know, like you can try things out and they don't always have to work out, you know, like if you're able to learn from it, you know, and there's a lot of meaning to be gained here. But this is not a non-toxic, friendly, wholesome fireside chat conversation. Unfortunately.
Beginning of this conversation, but you know, we'll brush that under the rug for now. You know, if
Brush
you
that
actually
under the
engage
rug
with
for
this,
now.
Again, the claim has never been anything that they identify as that object physically. It's that they have their view of gender, and I understand this because I think gender is an anomalous subject that is mostly aesthetic and really doesn't have all that much of an individual impact on your life outside of your...
Gender is just aesthetic. Fam, this is so bad. Oh, I understand that they don't actually identify with those things. You know, they aren't actually saying that they're a woman. They're just aesthetically a woman. Damn, this is really bad. I don't know what else to say. Like, I don't know. Am I making sense, chat? Like, this seems like the really easy response. I hope that I hope that Rem, like, jumps on this. I'd actually, you know, all right, I'm gonna like dock a point from him if he doesn't, because this is a gimme. If he doesn't jump on this, I'm actually gonna like punish him a little bit in terms of how I score, because like this is like the most gimme golden goose response ever, and like she should be punished for it.
Your own outside of your own self-identity and your ability to you know, express yourself. Somebody can say, yeah, I identify very strongly with deer. And
also,
I feel that
Pixie earlier, Rem actually said on stream that he goes by any pronouns.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so no, but yeah, like people were bringing that up earlier. No, like obviously we'll be respectful.
my gender expression is close to that of a deer. Maybe they like dressing up as a deer. Maybe that's how the world sees them. Maybe they wear antlers or whatever, and the world sees them like that, and they go, wow, yeah, the world understands me kind of like this. I'm not making the claim that I'm biologically a deer, but I certainly identify it in my expression. I don't see how there's any sort of contradiction going on there. They're not claiming that they are the object, the deer. They're just saying, hey, my aesthetic, performative expression is as such. And again, this is for the person that we're inventing who actually identifies as a deer. there's no actual person that we're actually talking about here because we've made up a person for this. If you were even to go in.
Sorry, I just wanted to interject. I'm just waiting to hear back to confirm. Doe has messaged me and asked about coming on. So
There we go.
I just wanted to check. Number one, everyone's comfortable with it, and number two.
Well, I would rather finish up this conversation with Demon Mama, so it is just one-on-one. I think. I'm not
What?
Wait.
No, I'm more than happy.
What?
To have a conversation
Hold
with
on a
Doe as
second. You
well.
wanted to insert yourself into here and call me a transphobe, but now when the
What's that Joker laugh? Yeah, that laugh though, like, if you want to seem like a sane person to like a person who's tuning into this and doesn't know the context, I don't know, like, she's implying he's a coward for not accepting a 2v1. Yeah, weird. Like, if you aren't comfortable, now here's what I'll say, right? Because I've done like a 1vx before, or I've done 1vx's before, like, I think that you can do them, but like, you're under absolutely no obligation to do them if you don't want to, right? Like, if you want to have a one-on-one conversation, you're well within your right to, and you're well within your right to like reject an offer for other people to join a conversation you are having with one other person. You can let the other person in if you want, but it's like to say that like, oh, well, Rem is scared of this other person. Like, no, well within his right to keep in a 1v1 conversation. And the laugh does not help her seem more credible. Yeah, that's weird.
the person that you were using to weaponize and calling me a transphobe wants to come on and defend itself, you're gonna run.
I'd like to bring in someone else then as well, Chet. If that's okay.
Okay, look, if one person's going on one side, you know, if you want to bring another person on, who do you want to bring on, Rem?
I can message Perspective Philosophy and see, because I know that you're not willing to talk to Destiny, and I respect that. I'm not going to force you to join a call.
Rem, why were you an ass to me on Twitter? You seem like such a likable guy. I don't get it. I'm giving you like a 5 for likability on this, because like, holy shit, like even after she like personally impugns you for not accepting a 2v1 automatically, then you even like go out of your way to acknowledge that you're not going to bring someone into the call that you know that she's uncomfortable with. Like, dude, you are golden in this talk. Like, any disagreement aside, like anyone who's watching this, like this is fantastic. I just never can understand why you're like being shitty to me on Twitter, but whatever. Rem tries to look like a nice guy in debates, but he's unbearable everywhere else. Gotcha. Maybe that explains it. Because like right now he looks like incredibly nice, but I've seen like he's just kind of been an ass to me otherwise, like on social media, like on Twitter and whatnot. So yeah, it just does not make sense to me. I can't tell if he's being duplicitous. If he is being duplicitous, he's doing a really good job at it. Like, I gotta give credit where credit is due. Like, if this is him being duplicitous and actually like feigning being a nice guy, like he's doing a really good job of feigning being a nice guy. Like, all credit where it is due. All right, hold on. Let me beat these bosses really quick. Oh, fuck. Ah, come on. God damn it. All right.
Oh, thanks, someone in chat. Yeah, like,
I can message
I identify a lot of
him
kind of
here
fairies for aesthetics and stuff, but I just don't consider it.
I mean, I
gender.
would bring on Destiny if
look, here's
would
what
you
we're
be
gonna
willing
do.
to have Destiny on?
I mean, I feel a bit uncomfortable with asking Demon to have Destiny on because of all the history. You know, I think what would be the best thing to do.
You want to know what? This is it. This is the one. This is your chance, Chud. Remember how I said, you say it, Chud? I'm going to come. Here I am. I'm here. You want to bring Destiny on? This is the last time. And I mean it. This is the fucking last time.
Alright,
If
we'll
any of
bring
these
in-
motherfuckers...
Wait, whoa. What about Doe? What about Doe? Doe hasn't said yes to... I'm not sure if Doe will speak to Destiny.
Oh yeah, of course.
You know, we've got to bear in mind Doe's, opinion on all this.
Absolutely. Totally.
So let me just check.
While that's happening, I can just briefly respond to you claim that I haven't engaged with people with neopronouns. I mean, you don't really know anything about me. I've read a ton of queer and gender theory. I mean, I am I've graduated with the philosophy degree, and I do a lot of stuff in indigenous studies, which includes a lot of research on.
Is it public knowledge where Rem got his philosophy degree from? I'm just like curious because I know like, I know he's not coming across in this conversation, but he generally like otherwise on social media comes across as like kind of like the ivory tower sort of philosophy. It's like, oh, if you don't exactly use these terms in the way that I'm meaning them, then you're, then I don't know, like morally impugns you. I'm curious if he has like a really solid philosophy degree. Ren thinks you need a philosophy degree in order to talk about philosophy at all. Can't stand him. Oh, that's great.
In general, the kind of like the thing I see is like he says something of like, oh, this is wrong, or like this is stupid or whatever. Like this is like very confident about a take. People like what do you mean by this? Can you explain more? Can you have a book recommendation? And then just like no response, you know?
Oh, that's great.
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like he seems like a smart guy who's like knowledgeable about things, and seems like, I don't know. I'd love to kind of break through that, like build a more positive relationship. So I like talking with philosophy people, and I think he has integrity to kind of stand by his positions even when he's a graduate. I don't understand. Like,
yeah,
he should be nicer.
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, he's doing it again. This boss is really weird. Oh fuck. All right. Well, about to. Not dead.
About you like
Anyway,
condemning kind of all socialists and kind of like a technicality, but I think it's because he's like very much like technical and ideological. He cares about correctness and truth a lot.
I mean, like I care about, you know, like it's fine to care about correctness or truth, but I'm trying to, I don't know, like I know I get like into spats with people on Twitter, but I am making like a genuine effort to try and have a healthier presence online and engage in like a more healthy, responsible way.
Yeah. Like, does he know that you walk back like the socials and things with the practicality?
Fucking, I don't know.
Wait, guy literally doesn't.
I mean, like he said that I blocked him because he had socialist in his bio, which is wrong and a lie, and I don't know why you would say that. So I don't know. Just ask about him if he talks to Destiny later. Yeah, I might.
Oh, he says that large political streamers should have some basic understanding of general philosophy. True.
Well, yeah, that is true. I don't know. Like, I have a lot of people in my community who are pretty well read in philosophy who I asked to explain concepts to me. Like, it's unreasonable to expect all streamers to have like knowledge about everything, but I think it is reasonable to expect streamers, you know, to make reasonable efforts to supplement the areas of knowledge that they do not know or that they don't have. You know, if they otherwise specialize in other areas, like, you know, to make reasonable efforts to talk to people who know philosophy or to have those concepts explained to them, to read on the relevant literature. Like, I think that those are good things that we should encourage people to do instead of just saying, oh, well, you don't have like a formal background in philosophy. Well, you can't fucking say anything about philosophy ever. Fucking dipshit, whatever. Wait, RGR doesn't know everything? No, surprisingly, I don't.
And, you know, insinuate something that you don't know about me. And actually, another thing you were saying actually sort of leads me to my point about you being transphobic, because you want to claim that gender for anybody doesn't have, this is what you said, I wrote this down to make sure I got it accurate. You said that gender doesn't have an impact outside of how you express yourself. But that's just not true. If we talk to trans people, I know tons of trans people. I've dated trans people. I have family members who are trans people, and they tell me that it's not just a matter of how they express. There's something that they are keying onto and homing in on that is not simply a matter of their self-expression, because when they, for example, before they were able to transition. Excuse me. I don't cut you off, Demon Mama. You have a real problem with this. I would just ask you to let me finish before you start speaking.
That is true.
I've tried my best to do that. I've slipped up a few times, but okay. When someone hasn't, for example, transitioned yet, they feel like they are a woman, despite the fact that they are not really expressing themselves because they don't feel like they can, because of societies that is around them, saying that they have to conform to certain types of gender norms because they were born and assigned as a male at birth, as though that's supposed to fucking matter, right?
Wait, hold on. I need to re-listen to some of this. I need to re-listen to some of this because I think that Rem is making like an intrinsic inclinations argument. Like, I'm pretty sure he is. I just need to re-listen to this and see if he is.
If you were even to go in.
Sorry, I just wanted to interject. I'm just waiting to hear back to confirm. Doe has messaged me and asked about coming on.
There we go.
I just wanted to
Wouldn't that
check.
be great?
Number one, everyone's comfortable with it, and number two,
Well, I would rather finish up this conversation with Demon Mama, so it is just one on. I think I'm not.
I knew it.
Wait.
No, I'm more than happy.
Hold on a
Conversation
Hold
with
on a
Joe
second.
as
You
well.
wanted to insert yourself into here and call me a transphobe, but now when the person that you were using to weaponize and calling me a transphobe wants to
that's
come on
normal
and defend
behavior.
itself, you're gonna
Well,
run.
I'd like
That's-
to bring
that's
someone
very
else as
normal
well,
behavior.
if that's okay.
Okay, look, if one person's going on one side, if you want to bring another person on, who do you want to bring on, Rem?
I can message Perspective Philosophy and see, because I know that you're not willing to talk to Destiny, and I respect that. I'm not going to force you to join a call. I can message
I'm the
him
Joker,
here
baby.
and,
Yeah, for real.
I mean, I would bring on Destiny if
look, here's
would
what
you
we're
be
gonna
willing
do.
to have Destiny on?
I mean, I feel a bit uncomfortable with asking Demon to have Destiny on because of all the history. I think what would be the best thing to do.
You want to know what? This is it. This is the one. This is your chance, Chud. Remember how I said, you say it, Chud? I'm going to come. Here I am. I'm here. You want to bring Destiny on? This is the last time. And I mean it.
That's a
This
weird
is the fucking
comment.
last time.
All right,
If
we'll
any of
bring
these
in-
Wait.
motherfuckers...
What about Doe? What about Doe? Doe hasn't said yes to. I'm not sure if Doe wants to speak to Destiny.
Oh yeah, of course.
We've got to bear in mind Doe's, opinion on all this.
Absolutely.
So let me just check.
While that's happening, I can just briefly respond to you claim that I haven't engaged with people with neopronouns. I mean, you don't really know anything about me. I've read a ton of queer and gender theory. I mean, I've graduated with a philosophy degree, and I do a lot of stuff in Indigenous studies, which includes a lot of research on two-spirited people. I'd appreciate if you wouldn't, insinuate something that you don't know about me. And actually, another thing you were saying actually sort of leads me to my point about you being transphobic, because you want to claim that gender for anybody doesn't have, this is what you said, I wrote this down to make sure I got it accurate. You said that gender doesn't have an impact outside of how you express yourself. But that's just not true. If we talk to trans people, I know tons of trans people. I've dated trans people. I have family members who are trans people, and they tell me that it's not just a matter of how they express. There's something that they are keying onto and homing in on that is not simply a matter of their self-expression. Because when they, for example, before they were able to transition, excuse me, I don't cut.
Okay, I think that I'm pretty sure he is getting at like a intrinsic inclination theory. Like I'm pretty sure that like we're talking about how there's this kind of underlying matter of the fact that exists for a lot of people. I think that I'm trying to remember what he said in the conversation. I know he's talked before about how he doesn't have these feelings, but like I think that it would be accurate to say that in the same way that most people experience color, though not everyone, right? In the way that like most people experience color, we can acknowledge that there are some people who just don't have that same kind of experience, right? And we can classify them as such, right? Like there might be some people who just don't have these intrinsic inclinations towards either end of the gender binary, right? More masculine, feminine, man, woman, so on, right? Like that very well could be the case, and we would say that you're non-binary. But like that doesn't mean that we stop acknowledging that most people seem to have these predispositions when that seems to be the case, when the vast majority of people in society are perfectly happy with these categorizations.
Cut you off, Demon Mama. You have a real problem with this. I would just ask you to let me finish before you start speaking. I've tried my best to do that. I've slipped up a few times, but okay. When someone hasn't, for example, transitioned yet, they feel like they are a woman, despite the fact that they are not really expressing themselves because they don't feel like they can, because of societies that is around them, saying that they have to conform to certain types of gender norms because they were born and assigned as a male at birth, as though that's supposed to fucking matter, right? We both agree gender and sex just do not have any connection to each other. Total agreement there. Demon Mama,
stop.
you're doing it again. Let me finish.
Ask me a question.
Wait. Okay. So wait a second. Let's just slow down a second, right? So was there a question in there, Rem, that you had, or was it?
No, I did not actually ask any question. And if I did, it was meant to be rhetorical. I was not actually seriously. I'm just trying to point something out.
Okay. Let Rem finish and then Demon Mama respond, okay?
Yeah, so this is what I think is transphobic, is because you are invalidating the very real lived experience of so many trans people and trying to insert and force your own experience of gender identity upon other people. You said that gender for anybody does not have any type of impact outside of how you are engaging in self-expression. But that is just not how a lot of trans people experience it. I'm not saying that you don't experience it that way. I'm not denying that other people experience it that way, but that is sure as hell not how my family members, my trans friends, and many of my trans allies experience their gender. And that is why I believe you are transphobic.
Okay, so.
And also me, right? Like I think that Rem is capturing my idea, or like my own experience. I very rarely talk about like, you know, I don't like using like my own lived experience as evidence for these discussions because, you know, I could have like, it could be the case that like, oh, actually I have an atypical experience, but compared to like other people, you know, if it's just I'm citing only my lived experience. But like the vast majority of people in society seem to be fine with the two categorizations of like man and woman and, you know, various gender roles which exist around there. That doesn't mean that like people have to be in those, but to say that like most people don't have these kind of predispositions, these intrinsic inclinations, and that in no way informs gender or our understanding of it seems really reductive and, yeah, transphobic. RGR, trust me, the worst part of about him is his takes on science. Oh, okay. Interesting.
So first of all, I believe you're an idiot. So if you have just as much grounds for calling me transphobic as I do for calling you an idiot, so I think it's fair that I get to call you an idiot here.
Okay, well,
now we're on even grounds. Now, secondly, first of all, let me just
very
lay out
likable
a little
person there.
You carded out your little philosophy degree, which I think you should get a refund for. But I'm going to card out a couple of different things.
With it.
I've been transitioning for fucking 10 years. I've been involved in this 10 years. My life has been defined by my experience of fucking gender and sex dysphoria.
Then why would you transition? Like, Demon Mama, why do you do that? Do you do it just because it's an aesthetic in the same way that, like, someone chooses to express themselves as goth? Like, it seems real, like, because that's a natural conclusion, right? Like, it seems like if you follow your conclusion to its end, then you have to concede that the reason you went through that over 10 years of medical transition is the exact same as why someone might choose to be goth. And I don't see people killing themselves over not being able to be goth in society, you know?
Well, careful, because it sounds almost like a unique dysphoria to be trans-argument, which is not the case.
Well, right, and we're not,
you know, it's never manifests in that degree, like in anybody ever.
Yeah, we would say that, like, if we want to be like super specific, that, you know, it's not like anyone has any like intrinsic inclination, some inclination beyond their own choosing towards expressing themselves as like goth, you know? Like that just doesn't seem to manifest. But right now with her logic, like these would be functionally like equivalent or like functionally the same. Which I think that she would bite the bullet on. I'm pretty sure like she is pretty happy about biting a lot of these bullets, but I would say that like that's just patently absurd.
And I recognize that this is personally, I've literally had agonizing surgeries to try and alleviate that. Okay? So I really, really hate this idea that like, oh, you're trying to be transphobic and push it on. I've not pushed anything on anyone else. It's you motherfuckers who keep coming at me over and over again, from RGR to Destiny to you, literally tagging me unprovoked on Twitter, who come at me about my definition of gender. I've never told anybody else how that.
Fam! I don't know what she thinks I do in my spare time. I think that today, or like yesterday, when I tweeted about her very interesting take that dear gender is just as valid as non-binary gender, I haven't, like, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't tweeted about her, like, I'm pretty sure since our debate. Like, I don't go around, like, conspiring against Demon Mama or some shit. Like, why do these people always obsess over me? Why do these people act like I'm some scary boogeyman hiding in the shadows, always conspiring against them? Like, I got other shit in my life. I don't constantly think about all of you. I don't. I promise you.
Meanwhile, we both have some weird haters, like, from her community that
tell
me they want to rape me or kill me or tell me I should kill myself. Like, a lot.
Like, it seems like
even today.
Just seems really... I don't know what the fuck she's thinking about. I wonder if she's going to cite any evidence. I'm going to be really interested to see if she actually cites, like, any evidence to back up this claim that, like, I'm constantly, like, harassing her or whatever, or especially tagging her on Twitter. I'd love to see evidence of that. But, like, yeah, I have her blocked because she's toxic as fuck, and I don't want to interact with her, you know? Like, she's a really bad person to be around because... if this conversation has anything to tell us about that. Oh shit, Roger, oh shit, are you not in the secret anti-Demon Mama conspiracy Discord? Did you want to invite? We have crap services. Yeah, sorry, I didn't get the invite. Yeah, I don't know. There's not like some secret conspiracy against her. I have other shit going on in my life.
They should think about their gender. When people ask me my opinion, my definitions, and the reason why I argue and advocate for...
And the other thing, yeah, this is also the same, like, oh, you know, I don't tell anyone to think anything. Like, this was brought up in our conversation. I think that this is a big reason why, she got triggered when I don't know, she got really, really, really mad when I said this in our conversation. I think Destiny has said the same thing to her before. But, like, as a public figure, I assume that the reason that people watch you if you talk about politics is because you prescribe beliefs that you generally expect your audience to take from you or to agree with, right? That generally is the reason why I would assume most people do political punditry. Maybe you just agree that, like, oh, no, actually the reason I do political punditry is for entertainment purposes, and actually you shouldn't believe anything I say, which is the Tucker Carlson route. If you want to go that route, then okay. Interesting move, but you can. But yeah, like if you prescribe a belief or a view on stream, it's generally understood that you're doing it because you expect your audience to like agree with you to some extent. You know, you don't just get up here and constantly talk about things that you don't like. It would be really weird. Like, I can't imagine any other reason for talking about these political subjects unless it's just purely for political reasons. So yeah, like, it's fine to criticize your beliefs if you're a public figure, because you are implicitly telling other people to believe those things that you're saying, you know? That's what we do. I think the difference is that you hold your beliefs through conviction. She does not. Oh, yeah. Time is circle politics is a horseshoe. Well, yeah, RGR, you want to actually avoid her. She claims to want to avoid you and Destiny, but is constantly drama stirring. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, you can all say, like, I don't really talk about her much at all. Like, even on stream, like, I think I've talked about her a couple times, like, when I judged Hippy Dippy a couple months ago. But even then, like, I acknowledged that, like, yeah, she's probably going to win. And I called it, you know? Because, yeah, like, she was going against people where her be mean to everyone kind of strategy ended up working out because she was talking to people who were assholes. And then in the one after, it didn't work out for her, and I called that too. But, like, I'm not going to, like, shit on her because I don't really care. Or I don't know, I don't care to the extent that she makes me out to.
For the things that I do it honestly. You're the one who's telling me that my position on gender is transphobic. So
it is.
The idiocy that you would put on display by walking in here and saying that I'm trying to force anything on anyone when you say that my definition of gender, the way that I understand gender as an identifier that allows...
Yeah. 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 I don't really have anything to add to that.
People to declare it how they are is transphobic, is utterly moronic to a level that I don't think that I can walk the audience through. And if they don't see that, I don't know.
Because she can't.
A lost cause. And if you don't see that, well, I know you're a lost cause. That's why I didn't want to engage with you in the first place. But here we are. So the reality is that obviously people suffer.
Hating Destiny pays bills. True. Destiny creating jobs
not
for
them to express themselves
hardworking Twitch streamers.
You pointed to this yourself. You said people consider themselves a woman before they transition. Yes, that's what I'm fucking saying. This person is valid as a woman before they transition. Yes, yes, obviously. And then they transition to alleviate other parts of it.
Well, right, but here we would, I mean, like, I would agree that, like, they are valid in the gender that they identify with, but the reason why isn't because, yeah, like, we would say that, like, the reason that they are valid isn't because of their self-identity. We would point to like their intrinsic inclinations, right? Like in my conversation with her way back in the beginning of the year, you know, I asked the same question, like, hey, so like, you know, before someone transitions, before someone comes out and identifies as a woman, like, are they actually a woman if they still, like, if they're a closeted trans woman, if they still have these intrinsic inclinations? I didn't use that exact terminology, but that, you know, I think at the time I was using like thought processes beyond your own choosing, which is like roughly the same idea. But I don't think that she gave an answer to that, actually. I'm pretty sure that she didn't. And so like, like here we would say that like, no, they are a woman, even if they don't identify as a woman, because they have these intrinsic thought processes, you know, because they have like these things that happen in their head where like if they had the right vocabulary and knowledge, that it would lead them to understand like, oh, these things that are in my head, oh, these actually lead me, these would be better satisfied if I like performed woman, so I'm going to perform that, right? But like those are the things that we're focusing on here, you know, and she just isn't acknowledging that. So like we would agree that they are woman, but not by a self-ID model.
We recognize that dysphoria can come from not being able to express yourself the way that you want to express yourself. And there are many forms of dysphoria. One that's particularly strong is when there are gendered aspects of yourself that you can't express because the world tells you that you can't. So again, you've somehow in this process of trying to frame me as a transphobe, you've actually gone back to what I was arguing. And you demonstrated that by the fact that you pointed out that you believe someone was valid as a woman before they transition. Obviously they are. Yes, they are.
Yeah, but we would say because of the intrinsic inclinations they have. Like, that's the reason.
If a woman is just someone who identifies as a woman, they don't identify as a woman, then they're just not a woman. Like,
yeah.
Which excludes eggs.
It does exclude eggs. Hold on. Can we pull up does someone have a link to r/egg IRL? Because, like, it is actually, like, incredibly relevant here, you know? Yeah, I am bigger. I just haven't been as active lately. But, hey, we might be changing that around. But yeah, hold on. Does someone have a link to r/egg IRL? It's like for, I don't think it says on here. I looked on my phone earlier today. I'm not sure if it says here, but like this has like over 200,000 people in it. And the description is explicitly trans people, memes about trans people in denial. Like, if gender is all based on self-ID, then you can't be in denial about anything. Because if you're in denial, then we're appealing to some kind of unchoosing, like some kind of psychological state of being, some kind of like psychological aspect. Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah,
there's nothing to deny.
Yeah, there would be nothing to deny. Exactly. It's not showing because your browser's in there.
All there is.
But yeah, like if gender is all self-ID, then like none of this matters, right? Like all these 200,000 people. Because then, you know, just like, oh, we'll just identify as a woman forehead. Oh wait, no, actually, well, I mean, none of that would matter, but because like there'd be nothing to deny. There'd be like no like underlying matter of the fact psychologically, which would motivate people to identify as a certain gender, even if they might otherwise not want to. Like a big meme on there is like hashtag still says though, because like they're specifically like denying the fact that they're trans, you know, like, but starting to come to the realization of it, you know? But yeah, Demon Mama's model would just like say that, oh yeah, none of that matters.
Of course. And keep in mind, I have been valid as a woman all along my entire transition process. Even
I don't disagree with that.
I am more easily identifiable to the unlearned average person who maybe has never thought about gender before. They might identify me just out of random, just say, oh, that's a woman there, because I have a couple of...
Out of random. It's not because it's out of random. It's because you've gone through transition that you are more performing gender, like a gender role, like the woman gender role, in a way that is more typical to how the average reasonable person understands gender. Like that's the reason. It's not random. It's like very precise.
of stereotypical feminine traits that I enjoy, that I happen to enjoy. But that doesn't make me more of a woman or less of a woman.
That I happen to enjoy? Why do you enjoy them? Just like kind of skipping over a really important thing there. Like, why do you enjoy performing femininity? Why do you go through medical transition? Because under your model, you would say that's the exact same thing as being goth. I mean, maybe you see it that way, but like the vast majority of trans people do not.
I'm also careful to specify it applies to social transition as well.
Yeah. Or sorry, you're specifying what in respect to that?
You said it's just like why medically transition, but it's also why socially transition.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not appealing to just medical transition. We're saying, I'm only bringing that up because she specified earlier, she made a big deal of grandstanding over like, oh, I spent 10 years medically transitioning. But then like asserted that gender is all just about aesthetic, which is be like, that's a lot of work for an aesthetic. That's a real lot of work for an aesthetic. You know, like it just doesn't make sense internally with what she's saying. I'm cis and there's no way I choose I don't ID with being a dude that much, but I don't think my gender hinges on how much I ID. Well, I mean, like, you know, cis people have like intrinsic inclinations too. Like most people seem happy with these gender roles, right? That's kind of the idea that we're appealing to. So we could say that like a cis person who doesn't have dysphoria probably, you know, like we could say that sometimes there's like cis people who feel gender euphoria, you know, like in the way that like guys who do like really manly shit, in hopefully like a non-toxic way, like maybe they feel a lot like a man and that gives them gender euphoria, you know, like cis people can feel these too, you know, and so can like cis women, right? Like anyone can feel gender euphoria. Like that's good. Everyone should strive towards that.
Woman. You're doing in
and
your
like
argument,
there's like
you don't realize
maybe an example
in
of
your
like with cis men, it's kind of the whole kind of I guess like drinking beer with the bros and like hooting and hollering and sports or whatever. Like men seem to take a certain pride in that kind of like
they're like really happy with it, which hey, with my bare BRB just gonna go cut down some trees with my bare hand. Yeah, but like they're, you know, like men seem to really like that, you know, which is like, hey, you know, good for them. You go have fun doing your boy shit. All right. Have fun. All right. It's just like, you know, like there's no reason that like anyone can experience gender euphoria, you know, like that's something that anyone can experience. It's not exclusive to trans people. So there you have like an example of like how you could know like clear examples of like people who experience gender euphoria, not necessarily dysphoria, right? And that can be the same thing for trans people too, right? Like you could have someone who is trans who doesn't necessarily ever feel like an extreme discomfort with their gender assigned at birth, but maybe they end up by virtue of some random thing that happens in their life trying different gender expressions from what they had typically done in prior parts of their life, and they discover like, oh, actually there's some other kinds of expressions I really like. In fact, they give me a lot of euphoria, right? Like that can easily happen. That was the case with Vera Wild when I interviewed them a while ago. That video is actually still up on my channel. That was a really good conversation. Yeah. I self-identify as a gamer. Well, I identify as a gamer. I'm not sure if that gets you into gender terms, but sure, go for it.
Yeah, like dysphoria specifically is kind of like a very constant, long-term kind of state of like pretty severe unhappiness that has their symptoms. But like in general, just the extent to which anyone can feel some degree of happiness or like comfort or discomfort with gender does apply universally. And the one example I thought of is like women in STEM. And STEM classes in some environments, like it's a big thing, and actually it's part of why there's a problem getting women into STEM is because it's a very masculine space and it feels kind of wrong and uncomfortable. And I dropped out as a computer science classes because it was just like I don't like this, and I'm in like a kind of a softer field that seems to be more kind of like, I guess, feminine. I like more social, emotional expression, artistic stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Using the skills, yeah, because it's the whole thing, and it's like it's a problem. People know when something feels like wrong or not for them.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
You're conflating somebody dealing. Yes, you are. While you're conflating somebody doing something about physical issues that or physical aesthetic or whatever parts of their body that they're not comfortable with that might have some societal overlap with gender, and you're saying that is a part of that's part of the gender. It's not.
I'm worried here because you're framing me, you know, as a turf. I said repeatedly, you don't have to do anything to your body ever. You don't have to undergo any surgery or anything like that in order to be a woman or a man. I don't appreciate you misframing my arguments. Also, I fully appreciate what you've gone through.
Can I respond to that first?
Well, no, hold on. You battered me with a lot of points. This is just how we're doing it. So let me finish, then you can respond to my points as well.
And sorry, I just want to clarify as well. Sorry, Doe doesn't want to speak to Destiny. I think Doe wants to come on and just speak to you, Rem. And I don't think we want to start bringing these other people in and turn it into this massive circle.
Well, I don't think that's really fair. I don't want it to be a two against one.
Wait, hear me out. Okay,
I'll leave.
Yeah, you know, leave or mute, and if you can guarantee, remember that you won't speak, then we can maybe do it that way.
Rem, Destiny's nervous for you. He's afraid you're going to get beat up.
Wait.
He's afraid you're going to
Wait, what? Where did I'm pretty... Rem, Destiny is nervous that you're gonna get beat up. Does anyone know where this is coming from? Or is this just demonmama trying to get in a random jab? Because I don't get how that follows from here in any way, because it seems to be the case that they're like, oh, well, if Doe doesn't want Destiny to come on, then they won't bring Destiny on. And it's like, oh, because Doe doesn't want Destiny to come on, that must mean that Rem is scared of... Or that Destiny is scared of Rem being alone? Destiny wasn't. That's a serious mischaracterization. Oh, Destiny typed something in chat. Oh, okay. What did he say? Just out of curiosity. DM is coming unhinged because Destiny is trolling in chat at the time. Oh, God. Yeah, I'm curious about what he said.
Well, okay.
I don't know why you are acting like an 8-year-old for some reason, but that's interesting. So if I can continue what I was saying, essentially, I fully recognize, you know, and I appreciate the experience that you went through as a trans woman. And seriously, good on you for being able to deal with that and all of that bullshit. You know, as someone who's non-binary, who has also struggled, which I think I consider myself trans, with having to conform to a certain, especially in academia, where there are really stringent standards, it has been extremely difficult for myself. But at the same time, I know that my own experiences as someone who's trans, as someone who's non-binary, you know, doesn't map onto other people, which is why I don't usually bring it up, because ultimately I'm not interesting. My own experiences are the experiences of everyone else. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, just to give you an idea. So like at this point, and again, I'm just grading on like likability and or perceived likability and perceived credibility. Like it's a slaughter. demonmama is at like a 3, and I have Rem at like a 9, and is out of 10. So yeah, like this is a slaughter so far. At least as far as like, again, like I don't grade on like how much I personally agree with them. I'm trying to do it like by how like someone who just doesn't know about these concepts would probably respond.
Say in response to what you were saying. Okay. Hold on. You're cutting me off again. We should put up like a ticker or something.
You literally said that's all I'm going to say on this, and then I continued. What the
fuck?
No,
yeah, specifically on that point. Now I'm going to respond to all your other points. Yes, that's how conversations work.
Okay, right. Let's let Rem finish, and then demonmama, you respond. Okay, and we'll have a few more interactions, and then
we get a time score graph.
Because I think
I was thinking about doing it on stream, like showing it on stream. I can send like a picture of my nose. I'm literally just like every time like they do something that makes them seem more likable, then I'll add a point. If they do something that makes them seem less likable, I take away a point, or like I cross out. I take away a point, and then vice versa for like credibility or perceived credibility. Yeah, like, and so like it doesn't have like timestamps, but you know, you can kind of see how it's evolved. But I mean, like, honestly, for a lot of it, like Rem has just been getting progressively more likable and more credible. And demonmama has just consistently, like, I don't think that she's just like started off unlikable, got more unlikable, and really hasn't established why she's credible. Like, she's at like a pretty, like, it doesn't seem like she's reasonably competent in these subjects. Or rather, there's no reason. Let me put it this way. There is no one who's going to watch this who didn't already agree with her, who is going to agree with her by the end of it. I can guarantee that. Like, she's not going to like convince any new people who watch this who just didn't know about these arguments to agree with her. I think. Like, I think that she's flopping on this.
the plan is, sorry, just I don't want to, but Doe wants to come on and have it a 1v1. So Demon Mama and if you
that's totally fine.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
Okay, so I already covered the sex, gender thing. Don't think they're connected. Not sure why you're framing that. I think dishonestly, I've said repeatedly, I don't think that they're tied to one another.
I feel like that's a stretch.
Another thing is just the fact that, before you transition, if you are identifying as a woman, that's because you want to be able to participate in something that society is telling you you cannot participate in. That actually just speaks to my point, that there is...
I mean, I kind of, I don't know. I guess it's hard to tell exactly, like, I think that if you bring in someone who's like unaware of these things and they just heard, oh yeah, sex and gender are not the same and they're different, then they would probably agree with him. So yeah, I won't dox him I won't dock him for that, because I mean, like, there's a nuanced conversation about intrinsic inclinations, but like to most people, he's gonna come across as reasonable there.
Something that you are identifying out there in the world. There is some behavior that society is saying that you cannot participate in. That's not an arbitrary thing. Those are so...
If you look at the chat replay, Demon Mama fans were hating on Rem. Oh yeah, no wonder. Listen, a lot of these people are the same people who hated on me when I talked to Destiny right after having the debate with Demon Mama. Again, like, that video is a night and day difference between if you just like focus on listening to us, and then if you actually like if you watch it a second time and focus on reading the chat. Like, if you listen to it through and ignore the chat, then you would think it's just like a super chill, reasonable conversation. If you watch through and you pay attention to chat and like primarily focus on chat, you would think I'm talking to like Hitler too, right? Like the antichrist Hitler. All right, it's just yeah. So that's not surprising. Yeah. No, they begin with, oh, this is someone who's saying things that make the person who I like look bad, so I dislike this person.
Social conventions, social norms that exist in the world that you, who are a woman, see and say, oh my God, that speaks to me. That is what I experienced. As a non-binary person, when I previously identified as a man, I would see non-binary people and be like, fuck, that's, or even with sexual identity, I knew I was gay, even though I wasn't able to participate in a lot of the gay culture. I was afraid of the ramifications of that. As someone who didn't grow up with a lot of gay role models, but I'd be able to point to things in the world and say, oh my God, I want that so badly. I want to be part of those spaces. I want to be part of that culture. I want to be able to participate in those types of roles. And the same thing goes for gender. So actually, it just speaks to my point, which is not in agreement with you. And I don't know why you keep thinking that I'm agreeing with you, because I'm not, because I'm saying that there actually are real things in the world that I can point to.
Ram, this is intrinsic inclination theory. It is. I mean, like, it's the right argument. I don't know. Again, I don't know why you get so bent up with me. Like, we're functionally making the same arguments. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like if we have some disagreement in our model with Rem, like, I'd be happy to talk to Rem about it in like a friendly way. Like, I legitimately.
You can listen. You can talk to Rem about it. Like, he's just been an asshat with me, and unless he like apologizes for how he's behaved, because I've never been mean to him. I don't know why you would be fucking mean to me. Generally, I'm trying to do this better, and I think I normally do a pretty good job of this. Like, if I'm ever like spicy with people online or on Twitter or whatever, usually it's because they start out being spicy with me. But like, I've never had any problem with them. I don't know why you would have a fucking problem with me. But yeah, if you want to talk to him, yeah, you can go for it.
As far as I'm aware, it was like the socialism thing, but yeah, I don't know. Like, I see no reason for hostilities here, and it would be, I think, good to end them.
Yeah, I don't know. If he ever like apologizes, then yeah, we can talk about it.
They are not biological. I've said that numerous times. Let me reiterate so you don't bring it up again. They are not biological. They are socially constructed
I see what you're saying, Scott.
Norms in the world that as society we have agreed to connotate as something related to womanhood or to manhood. And it's not going to be the same for everyone, but there's going to be overlap between these things, or else you get into this type of situation I described earlier, where we're simply just redefining words willy-nilly and being a bad faith actor in a conversation. In the same way, I can't point to a zebra and say, oh, look, that's a woman, because everyone would look at me crazy.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
and one final thing, I would appreciate you not, because I am disabled, don't appreciate you using ableist language. Let's just drop that, okay? Yeah, I mean, you called me an idiot. You have made multiple references to my intellectual.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe you should know it, but yeah, I mean, if Rem has autism, then yeah, like these like, I don't think it's necessarily like bad. It's not necessarily always bad to call someone like an idiot, or I don't know, like maybe it is ableist, but like at that point we start approaching like the question of like, all right, is any insult ever ableist, you know? The R slur seems pretty explicitly ableist because you're trying to like, you're trying to impugn someone for an alleged mental incapacity for like a like in an incredibly inflammatory and derogatory way. But yeah, like when you're talking to someone who specifically has autism, then you probably especially want to avoid these kinds of comments, right? Because yeah, like it's not great.
Abilities. I have not done that to you, so I'd appreciate the same type of respect. If I'm
Context
calling you
match.
transphobic,
Yeah.
it's because of a statement that you have directly made.
I mean, I don't think it necessarily depends on the person you're saying it to, because especially when there's expectation of an audience, you're basically conveying to a large audience, here's the word I'm using, here's what it means, and then I'm associating it with being bad and weak in ways that don't necessarily correlate.
I get, yeah, like that makes sense.
Like,
I guess I have to just like process through, because I mean, like, it seems like the conclusion, if we say that like that's something which is terrible in every situation exactly the same, then we probably just want to stop insulting people generally. Like that seems to be what we would concede there.
To me, I view it in like degrees, yeah, especially of responsibility and all. But to me, like the thing is like if one straight guy calls another straight guy gay, in like as an insulting, like demeaning thing, it's not hurtful because one of them is gay. It's like, you know, it's normalizing an idea that gay means bad. Though I think, I don't know, it depends like how the meaning of terms, there is some nuance to it. But it's typically only a threshold responsibility. Like, don't say, you know, any ableist terms. It's like someone's, like I'm a self-appointed kind of like bastion of wokeness to emulate, or like if they're criticizing other people for using similar language, and then they start doing it, then it's like, okay, then you created a reasonable expectation. This is what those words mean to you, and then you're saying it in that way.
Right. I guess that like for me, and because I'm still working through this, I guess that what I'm saying right now is that like even if I'm still working through this, we probably want to recognize that like especially someone that we want to be like especially careful about this kind of language with someone who is like autistic, right? In the same way that, you know, like you know, technically like using gendered language, or what do we call it? I don't know, like in the same kind of way where if someone, like the example with you know, if someone like were to call you a dude, I don't necessarily hold it against them the first time. What I hold it against them for is like, you know, if you after the fact like express like, hey, you know, don't do that, I find, you know, I'm uncomfortable with that, and then it's like, oh, well, then they should like respect your gender identity because you are cis, right? But like, but also being able to acknowledge that like, you know, if we have people who we recognize are like particularly harmed by those kind of things, and like even if we're still parsing through how to treat like all of society in terms of this respect, that we probably want to like be especially careful to not harm those people, because there's generally a recognized higher harm with like mistreating those kinds of people. I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if it's like, you know, some kind of California like surfer guy who calls everyone dude, it's like, okay, that just means person, you know. It's like, so you could specify like, oh yeah, just call me, you know, bro or whatever.
Right.
So it does depend a little bit.
Yeah. But I mean, like
trying to create a perfect trans-inclusive space, and like I will criticize anyone who's not perfect. Like, okay, then you'll bear more responsibility. And it's complicated.
Yeah.
There's all these levels to it.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah. So like that's why I say like, you know, here, you know, demonmama, it would be really bad if demonmama was aware of this beforehand. But like, you know, like now that she is told, she should probably like make some effort to like apologize and make amends. But we'll see what she does.
Okay, so if you want to call me transphobic because of a statement I've made, that's fine. But don't attack the way that I experience and have experienced my education.
So here's the thing. I'm very sorry for calling you an idiot. I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. I'm sorry.
I appreciate it.
Okay. I can't tell if she's being like insincere. I don't know. Like we'll assume that she's being sincere. Okay.
the jury's out on.
The thing you always keep an eye on though is the audience in the chat.
Oh, sorry, what?
What are the cultivated community beliefs? Like the chat is always thing to keep an eye on.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, I'm really hyper focused on the game and also oh wait, the chat, you mean the chat and like the
Well, like just like in general, like when those types of things happen, like what kind of thing is being cultivated. And that's why I try to be super careful with even like microaggression type language, because the culture that's like builds up is that the behavioral culture, which is super ableist and misogynistic.
lol, idiot equals ableist. OMFG, what a baby. LMAO, what a whiner. Jesus Christ, wowee, OMFG. Come on, no, fuck that, damn.
Yeah.
You just said crazy, what the fuck? Remen is unironic, SJW? Damn, Remen is a fucking idiot though.
And
wow.
It's weird to me, right? Because it's like a standard I hold myself to, and I understand like it's unreasonable for most people, but like I want to work in accessibility, and I have friends who are like education majors, and it's like a sin to like use that type of language, you know?
Yeah, like it seems really, yeah.
It is hard. Like don't posit yourself as like I am the model of wokeness, and then do that kinds of thing. Yeah, like that's it's a high bar. It's unfair. This stuff is hard.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know. I tried to do, like, I tried to the best of my ability, I think more than a lot of people online, to make sure that my community is not, like, toxic in this sort of way, you know? Like, I try really, really hard to moderate my community and make sure that they, like, actually are, you know, to a decent extent, acting out kind of the moral, like the positive morals that we advocate for in this space, you know?
Absolutely, yeah. It's always just about, like, degrees of reasonability and assume that an audience will take things with less nuance.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to more extreme extent. That's why I feel like
and I appreciate the apology. I do.
Mm.
I'll just recall that how this conversation started. I'm sure everybody can remember it. Now, with regard to
wait, what's that small jab?
They're completely absurd, and you.
I'll just recall how this conversation started. What's that an allusion to? I'll just ask chat to help me on that one because I can't remember.
You know this. You know this is a bad faith claim. That none of this is transphobic in the slightest. But let us.
It's
continue,
absolutely
and let's
transphobic.
point out
Her
some
logic
things
is
that you've said here
1000%
that
transphobic.
First of all, in your earlier example,
just to remind people, her logic that like gender is just an aesthetic necessitates. Oh, and also that you can identify as like anything as far as your gender is concerned, or with any aesthetic, quote unquote, necessitates saying that like, oh, you aren't really what you're identifying as with your gender. You're just aesthetically that thing. To which someone asks, okay, so what are you actually, right? It's not that I identify as a deer. I'm just aesthetically identifying as a deer. Oh, so you're not actually a deer then? No, I'm not. And then someone would be like, oh, well, you know, I'm not identifying as actually a woman. I'm just aesthetically a woman. Like, again, this is second wave feminism bullshit. Like, that's what it is. That's where we arrived at.
And while there may be some validity in kind of like the personality traits or aesthetics people are trying to describe, putting that in the same category as gender when they have clearly different systems of logic and importance and like innateness, that's why it's bad.
My gender is space mode. Yeah, it's by this logic.
You said I could identify as a woman tomorrow and not change anything, and people would be able to go. People would say, "Oh, well, I don't know about that," and they would know, and you implied that they would call you on the fact that you weren't actually a woman. That in and of itself is actually
he didn't imply that. God damn it!
The world would be right to not conclude that you're a woman. So you actually do have a position that is transphobic.
No, that's not what he implied. I mean, like, at least if he's, like, keeping the same kind of arguments, like, what he should say here, this is what he should say. This is what he should double back on. Like, the correct answer to this is, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I said was, he should say, what I said was that you would be using the word in a different way from what everyone else is, but that wouldn't mean that you're not a woman. What we pay attention to in determining whether or not someone is, like, a woman in this instance is looking at those motivations that go beyond their own choosing, like what we talked about before, right? And if you wanted to be like super duper correct, we would say intrinsic inclinations, right? Because that would be the thing that we would look at in primarily determining whether or not someone is or is not a woman, if they have those inclinations. Because if they don't, then they are just choosing it as an aesthetic. They would just be performing it in the same way that like someone who is trans race would just be like performing a different race without actually having like those same kind of intrinsic inclinations. Which is not good.
But there like aren't intrinsic inclinations to race, and that's actually a neo-Nazi conspiracy.
Yep. Yeah, this is the like when people argue that like trans race is valid in the same way that trans people are, that you have to either say that trans people don't have these intrinsic inclinations or that there are intrinsic inclinations towards race, which is pretty yikes. Just a bit.
Which is, the argument is that somebody declaring that they're a woman doesn't make them a woman. My position is that if somebody declares that they're a woman, that's what makes them a woman. See, what you're talking about is you're pointing to all of these different traits that we loosely associate with women, which varies entirely. Again, it's arbitrary. It is
varying entirely is not the same as arbitrary.
On a large scale, what people think of is what makes up a woman. Those traits aren't what makes someone a woman. What makes someone a woman is they're saying, I am a woman. It is their identity. Their right to say that. None of the other traits that they may or may not have, or they may or may not desire, or they may or may not associate.
At that point, again, like if you say that gender is all self-ID, then it is meaningless. And then you do arrive at the conclusion that like, oh, that you can identify as anything, including dear gender. But at that point, then you have to say, then you also have to conclude that like, oh, you're not actually a deer. Oh, you're not actually whatever it is you're identifying with. You're actually something else. Or you're like physically or like that's only something that you're identifying with aesthetically. It's not who you actually are. Like that's like the full issue with the self-ID model. DM basically arguing that genders are invented to oppress us, that no one is actually any gender. We're all just forced to pretend that we are. Well, yeah, I mean, like that makes sense if you don't acknowledge like these kind of intrinsic inclinations that people have. Yeah.
Being a girl.
I also like being girl. Hold on, I'm getting some messages. One sec. Okay.
Or womanhood as a whole, none of those make them a woman. And you keep conflating this over and over throughout the conversation while insisting that I'm transphobic. You keep insisting that there's something. There's, when somebody transitions, they're going for a thing that's real. And if they don't go for that, the implication being, which you won't say out loud, but the implication, if you follow your logic, is that if they don't go for any of those things, if they just say, I am a woman, and that is enough for them, and that makes them happy, that they are invalid as a woman. But I don't agree with
That's not what he argued.
That is a transphobic claim because I believe that
Mama just doesn't understand his arguments.
Identity that you declare
why would saying
I'm
a woman make someone happy?
There you have it. And it's that simple because I think that is the most coherent understanding of gender across our societies.
We can answer that question.
This is all right. No, she just said it. Like this is the whole bit, right? Like that's her reason for this definition is because I believe, like, again, the direct quote is, I believe that's the most coherent definition of gender across our whole society. But the problem is that, like, again, if we want to get, like, super deep into the philosophy, then, like, this goes back to the issue of, like, Aristotle trying to find, like, specific, necessary or sufficient criteria for every single thing, right? Wittgenstein would respond to that and say, no, actually, like, there are some things, like a chair or a game, that we actually can't think of any sufficient or necessary criteria for. That doesn't mean that you generally rely on necessary or sufficient criteria. They can be useful for a lot of things, but there are some things where we just can't be able to suss them out, and gender is one of them. So there, we need a different model, logically, to be able to suss out what it is, because just to say that, like, oh, because we can't find some universal criteria, that does not mean that there's no meaning there. It doesn't. It just means that we need another way to be able to evaluate what the meaning is and capture it. Like, it doesn't follow logically that, like, oh, just because you can't find a universal necessary or sufficient criteria for this thing, that there's no meaning to it, when everyone, or when the vast majority of people in the world are fine with man and woman.
It is something that we declare for ourselves in good faith with one another, and it doesn't actually tie to whether you wear dresses or whether you color your hair or whether you talk with a light voice or whether you have facial hair or not. No one of those things. And when you try to pin it down, you will find that, obviously, I know you say that we're not going to go into sex, but if you want to go to sex, what people will usually associate is they'll go, oh, well, this person has facial hair. That means they're probably a man or whatever. But there's tons of cis women who have facial hair. And likewise, I would say that if we're talking about gender, the reason why we split gender from sex is because we recognize that gender is something else. It's something we can declare. It's something that has to do with our own
hold on. To say, like, yeah, we recognize that it's something else, but to say that it's something, like, to say that, like, oh, yeah, to say that gender is something that we declare, like, over the vast amount of human history, gender hasn't been something that you declare, right? Like this is a relatively recent phenomenon that or idea that people are like Demon Mama are trying to advocate for, you know? Like to say that like, oh, you know, gender and sex are different in no way leads to the conclusion that, oh, therefore you can just declare it and self-ID as whatever you want.
Of course, increasing, you know, ease of access to transition and like getting more societal validation is based and cool.
Isn't the whole thing with Diogenes and the oh yeah, Nikki Chicken, right? Yeah, Nikki Chicken. What is a man? Nikki Chicken. Isn't that's supposed to be like one of the historical examples of like a reductio ad absurdum, right? It's like, oh, you have this this definition of what a man is, but under that definition, you want to know what else is a man? Naked chicken. Like, yeah, you know, like sometimes we just need a different way to parse out these ideas, but that doesn't mean that we don't have meaning for them.
I feel like even though Plato was like the student of Socrates, Diogenes is really the true heir, like the spiritual successor.
4 minutes, too long. We'll come back to it later. If we have time after we're done watching this, and we can come back to it.
Our own personal
I read theory
with the social world. And so I believe that the best way to go about that is to say gender is something you can declare, and we should take this on good faith, and we shouldn't be transphobic. If somebody says they're a woman, they're a woman. It doesn't hurt anybody. It works better this way.
Again, this goes to the difference between ontology and epistemology. Like, I agree that when someone says that they're a woman, ontologically, you should agree with them because we don't have mind-reading devices. We don't have better ways to know whether or not someone is or is not a woman. It's like, ontologically, like, yeah. If someone says that they're a woman...
I don't know about that. I'm not sure that's a proper way to dig into ontology and epistemology.
Okay, if that's not the right way to go about it, the whole point is that, like, normally, unless you think someone is lying, all right, and maybe, I don't know, if someone who's better suited with philosophy, I'm citing Avi for this one, so if I'm wrong, then no, I'm citing what he's told me.
Sure.
But basically...
Ontology is like what objectively exists, and the epistemology is what we can, like, know and understand. It's a study of knowledge.
Okay. Well, then, if I'm wrong, then we can talk about... Or if I'm wrong on, like, the framing of it. Basically, like, there's a difference between, like, how you figure out what category someone is in and, like, what something is, right? Like, figuring out what the meaning of gender is versus figuring out if someone is part of that gender, right?
Yeah.
A rule of courtesy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, like, also...
Self-ID is a really good heuristic for gender because it tends to be accurate, but it's not, like, what gender is.
Yeah. Like, that's a distinction here.
Yeah.
Like, not calling someone by a name that upsets them. But I mean, in addition to that, you know, like, you don't want to say that, like, because we're not necessarily... I'm pretty sure that Jordan Peterson would also say that, like, oh, you know, I don't think that trans people are who they say they are, but I'm going to be nice to them and not misgender them. Like, I think that there's a meaningful difference between that and acknowledging that, like, because we tend to weigh, like, the psychological aspect of gender very highly in terms of determining, like, what is a woman or a man or a non-binary person or so on, that's different because, like, self-ID is the best way to go since we don't have, like, since we don't have, like, mind readers to objectively tell us, like, what someone's intrinsic inclinations are. You know, there's a difference between, like, that versus, oh, I don't think that you're valid, but I'm just going to be nice to you. Right? Like, those seem to be meaningfully distinguishable.
Other position, the position that says, no, you must actually represent these particular traits, which I'm never going to define. You'll never actually define it because you can't. I know you can't. That's a bluff that I can call.
This is like saying that, like, okay, define what a chair is, and watching someone, like, try to define what a chair is, and then they're not able to. Like, you're... Didn't she cite Wittgenstein against me? Like, didn't she specifically cite Wittgenstein when she talked to me? Like, if she had read Wittgenstein, and spoiler, I know that she didn't fucking read Wittgenstein, because if she did, then she would know this. Like, the whole point is that, like, there are some things where if you try to find, like, these necessary, like, universal criteria, then you're not going to be able to. So we need another model to be able to, like, talk about them.
Yeah.
Like,
this whole argument is, like, trying to take a good faith look, like, oh, what are the necessary criteria for womanhood? And then, like, you literally just get down to being described as a woman. Like, that's the only consistency you can have. Absolutely. But that's absurd.
Yep. RGR, but she heard it in the ContraPoints video, so that's all she needs. True. God, I've talked with Natalie about that. I'm not going to talk about like Natalie's position on this because I don't want to drag her into this, but this is not what she intended. All right, I can at least say that much. And I say nothing more. I'm really excited about her next video. It's going to be fun.
You can't define what a woman is, because if I was to ask everybody in this audience what they think a woman is, every single person would have a different definition. Every single one of them. And if that's the case,
but the point here is that like we would observe like a general like similarity, right? Like we would observe like broad similarities in the average reasonable person's understanding of what a woman is. That's the point. Like not everyone is going to have the exact same prototypical idea of what a woman is, but like everyone's going to have like pretty, like there's going to be like a pretty shared overlap if you like sample a large group of people in the same social space. Like that's the point. That's what we're appealing to. That's the meaning that we're trying to capture.
Then you recognize that what a woman is, if we try to gather the traits and say, oh, this is it, is arbitrary. No one will have the same answer. People will have...
Mama wants to pigeonhole him as a transmedicalist. That's her whole argument. Oh yeah, she tried doing that. Y'all remember when she tried to like pigeonhole me as a transmedicalist when we were talking? She kept saying like, oh, are you talking about dysphoria? Are you talking about dysphoria? And I was like, no, I'm not talking about dysphoria. Like I kept specifically refuting her and she kept like trying to pigeonhole me into that. So yeah, that's not surprising.
Have some overlaps. People will have some things that...
Sorry, what?
Lots of people unfortunately believe her when she accuses people of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who just believe everything that she says. Like she has like a very dogmatic following. They don't think about what they believe. They just whatever Demon Mama. It's like the one meme where it's like, sorry, I don't have an opinion about that. Demon Mama hasn't done a stream on that thing yet. You know, it's like that kind of audience. Oblivion NPC dialogue trees, Dro.
That are totally out of left field. At the end of the day, gender, the way that we engage socially with regard to a whole number of things that we consider gender in general, is arbitrary. And therefore, we should be able to declare it at will in good faith. Simple. That is not a transphobic position, and to claim so is just dishonest. So I think what's going to end up happening here is that now you're going to try and weasel all over the place and determine how it's still transphobic instead of just admitting that you fired off the hip and we're being a total fucking dickhead about it.
Oh, okay.
Damn, it's like all the debate bro tactics. Damn, it's like debate bro tactics Avengers. Mind you, when I say debate bro tactics, I'm specifically making an appeal to like trying to go for like every single like optics win possible, as opposed to like actually engaging with what he's saying, right? Because I don't think that I'm 99% certain that she's not actually engaging with like anything that he's saying. Ends every argument with add-ons. Yeah, literally. Or I don't want to say I'm being hyperbolic when I say literally, but like the vast majority of her arguments are ending with ad-homs. Like they're all just like personal attack, you know?
Well, let me address your points. I mean, I could say the same thing to you, but because I'm trying to legitimate conversation with you, I would never accuse you of something like that. So I'll go.
Ram, why are you so likable?
You say that's something I said.
Why are you so shitty on Twitter?
Either I wasn't clear enough in my words, or you just misunderstood what I said. When I gave that example, so when I said we both know I'm not actually a woman, I meant that in like, I literally am not a woman. I don't really know what it would mean to be a woman because I'm not a woman. And I was giving an example where I'm making clear to you and the people in our circle that I'm not really a woman. And then the next day I come out and say, oh, hi, I'm a woman. Making clear to everyone that knows me that I'm not actually a woman. That's all I meant by that. I'm not saying that someone who says that they're a woman or that someone external is capable of saying, oh, hey, you're not a woman. That makes no sense. If someone says to me that they're a woman, no, I did not interrupt you, Demon Mama. I'm tired of this. I'm tired.
If it's quick, Demon Mama, let's just let Demon Mama quickly say.
No, that's not fair. I did not do that to her. Why did she get to do that to me, Chad? Seriously, that's just completely not fair.
Oh my God, please.
Come on, Chad, please be. This is not okay.
Well, okay.
Are you real? Are you gonna whine?
Just let me speak for like 2
Are you gonna
minutes,
whine?
2.5
Yeah, sure. I know. I appreciate it, Rem, and I have repeatedly said to Demon Mama that she needs to let you finish, okay? But it seems like in this particular case,
because I'm not the one cutting them off. That's not fair, Chud. So, okay, so next time I'll be sure to cut her off. Is that what you're saying, Chud?
Okay,
that doesn't seem fair to me.
Okay, Rem, continue your piece then. Say your piece, and Demon, when you go.
Okay, that's a little condescending. There's a better way to ask that. Optically speaking, is just right now you get a 10, but like there's just like an optically better way to ask that. You know, like he's doing a really good job. Again, like I don't know if he's just like faking all of this. You know, like maybe it's just like all this is an act to look super reasonable. But like if it is an act, that's like a slip up. You know, because it's like it sounded a bit condescending there. Like he could have done a little bit better. Again, this is being like super nitpicky because otherwise he's doing really well at the conversation. So that's like a really like that might be the difference between him getting like a 9 versus a 10.
You're gonna have to respond.
Thank you. Okay? I appreciate it. Okay. So yeah, that's all I really meant by that. If someone says to me, "Hey, I'm a woman," I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, hey, I'm pointing to this part of your body, and I don't see anything that I recognize as being a woman, and therefore you're not a woman." No, because womanhood involves more than
I agree.
Like physical appearance or something that is identifiable. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that Chud was an amazing, or I don't want to say amazing. Chud was pretty solid as far as moderating this. I'm not like I'm not seeing any like major red flags creeping up.
It has to do with our cultural role, the way we interact with the world, our behaviors, the way that we even speak. I mean, these are really complicated things that cannot be identified just by having someone look at you, which is why I would never, ever support anyone saying to someone who identifies as a woman that you are not a woman. However, we're having a theoretical discussion here about the nature of gender, so that's just not really relevant. Again, you brought up sex and gender again for some reason, even though I've said repeatedly, you know, we're in agreement with this. It doesn't matter. You also said that you challenged me like saying, well, I bet you can't identify what it means to be a woman and you're going to weasel your way out. No, I'm not a woman. I'm also not a man. Part of the reason I am non-binary is because I literally can't recognize what those things mean. You know, I have a professor, or I had a professor at my university who talked to me and said, you know, people often ask, you know, to define myself, and I simply can't. I don't really know what it means to be a woman or to be a man or to even be indigenous. Like they can't figure, and I feel like I'm the same way. I can't really.
So like, I think that Rem is doing really well here. Just to like give my thoughts on like this argument that like, oh, I can't really define it. I think that's actually like pretty understandable, right? So like we go back to like, you know, these intrinsic inclinations that most people have, but not everyone, right? You know, there's other experiences. We can call these like qualia experiences, like some like things that are completely experiential, where we can understand that like, we understand them primarily through how we relate our experiences to other people, using those same kind of experiences. Like, for example, if you ask someone to define what red is, like what the color red is, it's really, really hard to actually like give a definition of the color red that's not in any way referencing something else, right? It's like, what is red? Oh, well, you know, it's the color that's kind of like in, you know, it's the third of the 3 primary colors, or it's somewhere between purple and it's somewhere between purple and orange, or you can give some examples like, oh, these are examples of things that are red, and the apple is red, right? But like, because it's completely experiential, it's really hard to put into words what that feeling is unless you make it relative to something else in society and something else that, importantly, other people understand, right? Again, Wittgenstein talks about like this is like a critique of personal language, right? Like if I say, again, this is an example of like, you know, if I say that like, oh, I identify as a bling blong, not only does that not match up to other socially understood phenomena in society, or like other socially understood roles in society, but also no one else is going to know what that feels like, right? If I say I identify as a bling blong, or I feel like a bling blong, no one else has any other shared experience or understanding to be able to know intuitively what that means. Whereas if I say like, oh, that looks red, other people know what I'm generally talking about because we're all kind of assuming that we have like this shared understanding of a concept, you know? And so like it makes sense here that Rem, you know, he could very well be someone who just doesn't have these intrinsic gendered inclinations, and he might just not feel really anything. And, you know, in the same way that someone who is colorblind might not really experience color, and that's fine. But that's just kind of like so like what he's saying right now maps onto like my understanding of this topic. That's all I'm saying. Otherwise, like I don't have any problem with what he's saying.
Point to something in the world that I point at and say, oh, hey, wow, that's me. So that's why I'm personally non-binary. And I think you're being contradictory because you say that gender is one's engagement with the social world, okay? You can't simultaneously say that it's the way we engage with the social world while also saying that all gender is your self-identification. Because if it is engagement with the social world, that means you're pointing to something in society, in the social sphere, that has its nature in the gender roles that we do have. So if I am saying that I am a woman and I really want to be a woman and I feel like I'm a woman, that means that I'm pointing to something outside of myself that I am identifying with, or else gender dysphoria wouldn't really exist at all. Gender dysphoria would not exist if someone didn't see something external to themselves that they identified with. Why else would gender...
Hold on. All right, I'm going to pause here because like kind of true, but not. So again, the way that I think about like intrinsic inclinations is kind of like, everyone has these intrinsic inclinations which predispose them towards like a myriad of different kinds of, I mean, again, it's a quality experience, so it's really hard to like like pinpoint down with like a really super clear definition what they are, but it seems to be that like we all have intrinsic inclinations which predispose us towards, generally speaking, more masculine or feminine expressions or like sometimes like feelings about our body, right? And so like the way that interacts with gender in society is that like since most people who are assigned like let's say one sex or another, like let's say most AFAB people generally have like more stereotypically feminine intrinsic inclinations, then most of them will be pretty satisfied like fitting into the social role of woman, right? But if you have someone who has intrinsic inclinations, but instead of being assigned to that gender that they are most inclined towards, they're assigned to a different gender, then they might have like, they might experience discomfort from not being able to perform that gender role, that prototypical gender role that they're more predisposed towards and like satisfying these intrinsic inclinations. That's complicated. Basically, it's like if you took a trans person and you dropped them off on a desert island, they wouldn't have any genders to identify with, but they would probably still end up like experiencing these intrinsic inclinations and probably acting in, like more feminine or masculine manners, right? That's the same kind of reason why when we look at like cultures across history and across the world, that like even though you have like different cultures developing completely on their own, that there's still like some kind of universality in terms of like certain kinds of like cultural expressions and gender expressions, right? Because there's like some kind of underlying matter of fact that's informing those things. But do those inclinations come from observing and somehow imprinting on that gender from childhood or from observing people with that gender? Probably like a combination. Julia Serrano suggests that like it's a combination of nature and nurture, right? So like, for example, if you have, like there's some examples of baby, like I know there's like some studies of this, where it's like you have children who are only like a couple months old who end up playing with like more feminine or masculine toys, right? So from birth, we have like some, like even at like a very early developmental stage, we have some kind of intrinsic inclinations towards more masculine or feminine expression, but it's probably also combined with like, how people are exposed to certain prototypical gender roles in society over time and which best matches up with their intrinsic inclinations or like which best match up out of the ones that are available, right? Trying to think of a good analogy. One good analogy, here's something I'll give you, right? So like we talked about taste earlier. Like taste isn't something that you choose. You don't choose to whether or not something tastes great or not. Like if you eat crap or if you eat dirt, right? Like you can eat dirt. You can choose to eat dirt, but if you choose to eat dirt, there's a good chance that you're not going to think it tastes that good, right? But it's possible that like if you just like choose to eat dirt over the course of your life, then you might develop like some kind of predisposition towards that. Like it's entirely possible. In the same way that like people who are young might hate beer, but they might develop like a predisposition towards liking that as they go through life, right? Just based on like habit. And so we can probably think of like gender in terms of like a combination of kind of like habitual practice and development of intrinsic inclinations and like intrinsic inclinations based on like how you're born. Yeah, like that seems to be like a good way to kind of think about like these intrinsic inclinations and kind of accounts for the fact that, you know, some people can feel gender euphoria from things which are completely constructed within society, right? Like, why do trans girls like feel so good when it's like, oh, dress goes spinny, you know? Probably because like they've been over the course of their lives and their experiences within whatever culture they inhabit, they've been kind of like habitually exposed to the idea that like, oh, this means woman, you know? So it's like if they perform that, then they're kind of performing like very closely or like appealing to these intrinsic inclinations that they have. That'd be kind of like and I feel like that's a pretty solid framing of it. It explains a lot.
Gender dysphoria exists in the first place, if not for the fact that they were simultaneously recognizing something external to themselves that they see and identify with, while at the same time being told by society that they're not allowed to identify with those social rules and norms. And that's ultimately where your contradiction lay. You said a lot of stuff that just misrepresented my position. And I just want to reiterate, what I think is transphobic in your views is your imposition of your own personal experience of being a transgender woman.
Oh, demonmama's going to say I'm not responsible for anyone believing what I say.
As being
Here it comes.
Trans, but at the same time recognize that it is not simply, as you said, I wrote this down, you said that gender doesn't have an impact outside of your own self-expression. That's transphobic because a lot of trans people, please stop cutting me off.
Okay,
a lot of trans people
okay?
point to stuff external to them and say that's what I want to be, but society doesn't let me, and that's where the oppression of trans people comes from, and that's what's transphobic, is your failure to recognize.
I mean, like, I think this is true in a lot of cases, but like, again, to summarize what I was saying, I do think that if you took like a trans person and you dropped them on a desert island with like a mirror and all the things they needed to medically transition, I think they still would, right? It doesn't matter. It's not like a, oh, you know, like, society is the specific reason why I'm feeling dysphoric, you know, like it seems to be more that like there's kind of like some kind of underlying matter of the fact that that's being appealed to, you know. In some way it'll be informed by society, again, like the nature part or like the nurture part of like the nature nurture discussion we had earlier. But like, you know, if I were dropped on a desert island by myself and I had a mirror and stuff to transition, then I would still medically transition, right? Yeah.
The lived experience of so many trans people, the majority of trans
otherwise
people,
this is decent.
Ridiculous claim. So okay, this is precisely why I wanted to jump in, because that was a unbelievable waste of my time. Like literally you just restated the exact same thing you had stated before, which is just very frustrating. I feel like you're not actually engaging with any things I'm saying. But let me just
what?
These things. First of all,
demonmama saying, oh, you're not actually engaging with anything I'm saying, while simultaneously not engaging with a single thing that he's saying.
And you act as though the fact that we call it gender dysphoria defines it absolutely definitively as a part of gender. It isn't entirely just gender. You see, there's a whole bunch of stuff that leads to dysphoria. I say this as somebody who's experienced dysphoria. And first of all, I don't impose my experiences on anybody else. My position is literally
there it is.
Opposite.
Yep, I don't impose my experiences on anyone else.
You can't take back your words. You can't admit that you were wrong. That you have to feel like you have to say that I'm doing something that doesn't. I
swear, every other thing she says is an ad hom.
I really hate that, and that's part of the reason why I didn't want to engage in here, because I think from the very basis this is a bad faith engagement where you come in and say things like transphobic with no real evidence besides, well, you said something that I disagree with, and because you disagree with me, that must mean that you're imposing on it.
Again, the reason why what she said is transphobic is because by her logic, you would have to say that, oh, trans people only aesthetically identify with the category of women. They're not actually women, or same for trans men, non-binary people, so on. Like that's the reason, is because you're specifically invalidating trans people. Like that is the reason.
On everybody else, even though I've never.
I'm pretty sure he said that, and she's just not like acknowledging it or responding to it.
I've never impugned anybody for disagreeing with me on this particular topic at all. You know, it's just really weird. It almost seems like you kind of had a line that you wanted to go with, and now you're back off it, even though you don't have any evidence.
Let me just hear that back again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm really trying to play it cool. We're chill stream. I just need to hear that. I just need to hear that one more time to see if I heard it correctly.
Well, you said something that I disagree with, and because you disagree with me, that must mean that you're imposing it on everybody else, even though I've never imposed it on anyone else. I've never claimed to impose it on anyone else. I've never impugned anybody for disagreeing with me on this particular topic at all. You know, it's just really weird. It almost...
What? She's never impugned anyone for disagreeing with her on this at all? Hey! Demon Mama! Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? For people who don't remember how the conversation between us ended, it specifically ended with her trying to say that I was only trying to look at gender so that I could justify my existence as a trans person. Oh my god. There is zero chance she actually remembers that. Yeah, I you know, it's weird because like a lot of people from her community constantly cite back to the conversation I had with Destiny afterwards as if that's evidence that he was being transphobic, which wasn't, by the way. But like they always very specifically leave out how she like very specifically ad hom that like, oh, the only reason that you're making this argument, Riley, isn't because you actually like have arrived at your conclusions logically and you've thought through a lot. No, it's just because you're trying to justify your existence as a trans person, as if, you know, just a weird thing that a lot of people seem to specifically not remember from our conversation. Oh, there's here she actually remembers that because most of her points are off-the-cuff responses to undermine the opponents, not real arguments. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's that's a good laugh. Anyway, all right, let's keep going.
Almost seems like you kind of had a line that you wanted to go with, and now you're unwilling to back off it, even though you don't have any evidence for that line. But I have another question for you. Okay. How do you know you're not a woman?
I'm just finishing writing down this. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. How do you know you're not a woman?
Because I can't point to anything in the world and say, wow, that really speaks to me. I really can't. It's the same thing with something like
so you've declared that you're not a woman, and we all take it at face value. Because you have no reason to lie about such a thing.
Yeah. He literally she's all right for someone who's saying, oh, you know, you're not actually listening to any of my arguments. Like, he gave actually just a really profound answer. If I want to like rephrase a little bit of what he said, I mean, like if he really wants to, he can dispute what I'm saying. But I mean, this makes sense, right? Basically said, I don't have any intrinsic inclinations that would lead me to believe that identifying as a woman would satisfy those inclinations, right? Like I look at the category of woman as it's generally understood in society, and I don't have any intrinsic inclinations that would be satisfied by performing that gender role. That seems to be essentially what he said. And she's like, oh, so you don't identify as a woman. As if that's what he was focusing on, what he said. Like, she's just not listening to him at all. Like, she's trying to get a specific answer out of him when he's saying something else that's actually, like, really profound. Some people face incredibly dangerous social pressure to lie about their gender. Yeah. I mean, literally, this is, like, I want people to, like, remember some of the other implications of this. Like, if you have someone who comes from a conservative family, where they aren't able to like be authentic and they aren't able to come out and say who they actually are, then they might lie about their gender. But under this definition, then, oh, well, they're lying about who they are to their friends in society. So I guess that just means that actually they're the gender they're saying that they are. Now, Demon Mama, like, no, I can imagine, because I brought that up when I was talking to her the first time. And so her response, I believe, was, oh, well, in that case, someone would be dishonest. They're not being truthful, which doesn't actually respond to like the idea. It doesn't actually respond to the idea that self-ID is the entire basis of gender, because like if someone self-IDs something, then it doesn't really matter what you're saying, right? Or whether or not what you're saying is necessarily truthful. You know, we're taking it, like she just said that, you know, we're going to take the person at their word, and that's what the gender that they are is. But we could also look at like the egg trans person, or like the trans person in denial, And there, Demon Mama has absolutely no reason to say that those people are the gender that they would eventually come to identify themselves with, you know? How do you know you're not a cat? Well, I don't have fur and I don't feel the need to sleep all day and I don't... Yeah, so you have no reason. You're just declaring it. Got him, I guess. Yeah, literally.
No, I agree. Because you've come to the conclusion that you aren't a woman. And that you aren't
based
a
on
man.
what?
Wait, you acknowledge that you... this might be making
based on what?
But do you have gendered expression?
I don't care.
Okay, but do you?
She's not. Demon Mama, respond to what he's saying.
Identified by some other uninformed people as gendered. Like, do you wear, do you have a beard? Do you have stuff like that?
People usually label me he, him because I have roles that people traditionally associate with being a man, and that's fine. I can understand why people would make that mistake.
So here's my point. Despite the fact that you have some of those gendered things, and you probably like some of them, maybe you like having a beard even though you're non-binary, even though that is gendered with male, and you want it, has nothing to do with your gender identity. You identify as non-binary because that's what you think is right for you, even though you have...
But why? Like, she's kind of like, she's getting so close to the actual important issues of why does someone come to the conclusion that they are a gender? Why does someone do that? Why do people do that despite society overwhelmingly telling you to not identify that way? Why do people do that despite the incredibly high suicide rate for trans people? Why do people do that? Why do people suffer through conversion therapy and end up coming out still being the gender that they are? Like, she's so close and just is ignoring all of that as if like, oh yeah, the reason that you choose to be a gender is the same as if you choose to be goth. Like, there's a meaningful difference there. You don't choose to have like a sexuality. You don't choose these things. You don't choose to experience the color red. You don't choose to experience a sound or a taste. Like, these are things that are experiential. I don't know. She's not responding to like what he's saying. Like, he's actually having like some really profound question or like answers here. Like, I believe him, you know? Like, he's giving like all the right, and I'm not saying that like you have to believe someone, that is what makes them valid, right? But like what he's saying makes sense, you know?
Masculine and maybe even some feminine things. And I bet that if you were told, I don't know, let's make an assumption. I don't know this about you personally, but if we were to put this,
you have to go through the verification process.
Imagine there's a non-binary person who has a beard, and they're told, you can't do that. That's a man thing. I bet that would feel bad, even though they don't want to be a man. They want to be non-binary with a beard.
But why?
Do you see where I'm getting at here? This is the thing with gender. You can be a woman who is manly. You can be a man who is womanly. You can be a non-binary person that is whatever the fuck they want, because these things don't directly tie to one another. What we self-identify as is separate than any individual piece of what we would generally consider gender expression. Now, I happen to think that we don't really have the right terms. I don't think that using the term gender dysphoria is perfectly accurate, but I've never once...
Now, I want you to watch this, because what's going to happen is she just described how, like, yeah, you know, like, sometimes people might not present to society in the way that they intrinsically feel or that they internally feel about themselves, which is true. But it seems like where she's going, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong on this, but it seems like where she's going is that she's going to say, and therefore, because that can happen, the only way we can define someone's gender is by self-identification, which she hasn't laid any evidence for, other than to say she can't come up with necessary sufficient criteria, which, I mean, Rem has been responding in generally the same ways I would, just with different language. But like, that's what it seems like she's going to be doing. It's like, oh, because there is this problem, therefore the solution that I propose is the best one, even though she lays no groundwork for why her solution is actually the better one over, for example, like a family resemblance model and an intrinsic inclinations understanding of gender in a intersubjective and subjective manner, respectively, which seems to be a much better way to capture what we mean, personally speaking.
Denied, not even when I said that gender doesn't really affect us, which I think is you jumped on that in the most uncharitable possible interpretation of that.
Uncharitable. You're being uncharitable.
I would say that our expression of gender is
how far can we go without an ad hom?
Cause gender dysphoria. You say this is my expression. People tell you you're not allowed to express this way because of this reason. Basically what you did earlier. You say, I'm a woman. They go, yeah, but you have a beard. Yeah, but you wear, camo pants. Oh, yeah, but you like playing with guns. And then you go, no, that fucking makes me feel bad. I want to express this way. And then you go to do that way. And because our society is very binary, because we've barely just started pushing into non-binary stuff, people go, oh, yeah, well, this person wants to express more femininely. Well, that means they are a trans woman. Even though there's tons of non-binary people who don't consider themselves women, who still nonetheless may have been assigned male at birth, right? They consider themselves non-binary. They don't consider themselves a woman. They're non-binary. And yet, nonetheless, they might wear dresses. They might intentionally take hormones to feminize themselves physically because that is how they express. Not because they're a woman. They're not doing it because they've identified some womanness that they want to be.
She's still not going into why or addressing the question of why.
That is commonly associated arbitrarily with women.
Arbitrarily.
And they go, I want that trait for myself. It has nothing.
I don't think that she knows what arbitrarily means. I don't. She's implying that he's making trans men arguments. Yeah. That's like the goal, right? It's like, oh, how quickly can I get this person to be labeled as a trans med so I can just dunk on it? Like, it's kind of like the race of the thought terminating cliche. Like, how quickly can I get this get this label to stick? Be like, you're a trans med, and then just like ignore everything that they're saying. Yeah. She's arbitrarily... True! She's arbitrarily using the term arbitrary.
Nothing to do with whether they're a woman or not. The only thing that has to do with them being a woman is whether they say they are or not.
No.
Just like the only thing that has to do with you being non-binary, just like you answered yourself, is
no, I don't think that he did. I'm pretty sure that she's literally putting words in his mouth.
Well, I'd appreciate you not...
Are you not done? If you would... Sorry, I said I rest my case, but I actually had more to say. Okay. So I would appreciate if you would take back your abhorrent, completely uninformed, and baseless arguments that I'm transphobic.
She never responded to his allegations.
Not characterizing the way that I experience my own gender identity. I think that's entirely inappropriate. I completely disagree. That is not how I experience my gender identity. My gender identity is absolutely not at all just merely my self-expression. Instead, it's, as I've said multiple times, my engagement with the social world and seeing, and this you're making a failure here because you're not recognizing that the nature of being non-binary is actually seeing the, please, come on, is actually seeing the very real man and female roles in society and saying, I don't really gravitate to either. But that still necessitates recognizing the very real nature of those roles in society. So I'd appreciate you not trying to describe my own gender identity. If anything, that's probably the most transphobic thing that you've done here is try to impose, again, your own views on what it means to be trans or non-binary upon someone else. I am not rejecting that. Hold on, excuse me, I did not cut you off. You spoke 3 minutes.
I don't care anymore. Like, this is ridiculous.
Come on. This is
okay, right. Okay.
I don't care if I interrupt you anymore. I just don't care.
So, Demon Mama wanted to speak to me about like the hippy dippy, and this has become this thing. What I'd like to do is to start.
Now, look, that was her closing argument. Let me give mine.
Okay, that's fine. Rem, I'm going to let you finish. I'm just going to say I really want to wrap this up, and then Demon Mama, not to say go away. I love you, but like maybe it's time, maybe to swap. Just you go and enjoy your day off, and then Doe can come in. Are you okay with that? Is that okay?
Fine, whatever.
Okay, so yes, let me just finish. This will be my closing argument, and then I can talk to Doe. So yeah, I think that's the most transphobic thing you've done is try to impose your own experience of your gender identity, which again, I have no problem with you saying that the way you experience your trans identity as self-expression, totally fine. I don't reject that. All I'm saying is that a lot of people don't experience it that way. And what is transphobic is, again, your complete insistence that gender identity consists solely in your own self-expression, because I sure as fuck don't experience it that way. My friends sure as fuck don't experience it that way. And many of my trans allies don't experience it that way. That's what I think is transphobic. And let me just, I'll be quick so we don't.
So I agree with Rem. This is, I don't know. This feels like intrinsic inclination theory. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why he's mean to me on that. Whatever. But yeah, no, I mean, like, otherwise his arguments, like, I think I generally agree with him.
spend too much time. Yeah, just about the different things you were saying. You were talking about gender dysphoria isn't just about gender. Okay, then you're just talking about something different. I mean, if we're talking about gender dysphoria, clearly we're talking about gender. Obviously, dysphoria encompasses more than just gender, but I say gender dysphoria because we're talking about dysphoria having to do with gender.
True.
You also, again, you were accusing me, you talked about my misspoke and how I now have to walk that back. I think that's really uncharitable, and it's ironic to me that you accused me of being uncharitable towards you, because actually I wasn't being uncharitable because you just reiterated what you said, which is that trans identity and gender expressions consist solely in self-expression. That's what I think is transphobic. There's no lack of charitability there. That's just your fucking position. And hold on. I have one more thing. And also, this is another thing. I don't know if you're going to be able to engage with this, but you're consistently conflating the distinction between one's practical engagement with gendered language and approaching someone else, from the third person point of view. Like, for example, if I came across someone and they say, oh, hey, I'm a woman. Yeah, I've said this. I said this before you went on your whole rant. I said, yeah, if they say that they're a woman, you just treat them as a woman. It's that simple. But there's a distinction between that conversation where we have absolute agreement and the conversation about the actual metaphysical nature. I know it's a complicated word, pretentious. The metaphysical nature of gender itself, which is obviously the discussion we're having. We're not talking about this more practical application of gendered language. And yeah, I think anyone who seriously listens to what we just spoke about will find that Demon Mama consistently actually wasn't engaging with my points, has very clearly stated many transphobic takes, and on top of it, you just completely resort over and over again to add homonyms against me, call me an idiot, and you try to impose your own perception of gender upon myself, which is actually transphobic. So yeah. Okay. Now we can talk to
I'm glad that we had such a definitely good faith conversation where you carted out attack helicopter jokes. You claimed somebody was something that you claimed somebody that you had. Excuse me, I'm not done.
Sorry, just wait, please. Okay, listen to me, okay? This is my fucking point here, right? This could go backwards and fucking forwards forever, okay?
Right, so let's end it, and I'll talk to Doe now. That's what we agreed to.
Yeah, but hang on a sec. No, because you've had the final word here, right? And then fucking, I don't know, like, this is kind of just, when did we agree this? Like, I don't know.
I was just, you said
I mean, I'll be fair and say that, like, yeah, like, Demon Mama was blatantly like, she was just lying about him and, like, the closing statement. So I think that, like, if someone is lying about you, or if you have good reason to believe that someone's lying about you as you're talking about them, then you can interrupt. Like, yeah. Yeah. This isn't true. He used a helicopter phrase to illustrate a point, not make a joke. That's really... Yep. Yeah. No, that's just a lie. Yeah.
I rest my case, and then you said, "Oh, I have one final thing to add." I responded to your points. Okay, I mean,
I'm not sure if Demon Mama saying I rest my case.
Right? Demon Mama, I grant it to you. You obviously have a lot of ground to make up here. You can ad hom me for the next 2 minutes to appease your audience. That's fine. Go ahead.
I mean, I just want to say though, because sorry, look, I do have a bias. I admitted that at the start. I just find it a bit like, I appreciate where you're coming from when you say it's based on your statement, but calling someone transphobic is an extremely strong accusation, and I think
I mean, she tried to say how I experience my gender, which is absolutely transphobic, Chud. I hope you would recognize that too.
Doesn't even come close.
Chud, did you not hear Demon Mama try to explain how I experience being non-binary?
Am I the only one who heard that? Excuse me. Yes, you are literally the only one who heard that. You're the only one who heard that. You've been hearing what you want to hear. I asked you, how do you know that you're non-binary? And then you...
she tried to say how I experience my gender, which is absolutely transphobic, Chud. I hope you would recognize that too.
Doesn't even come close.
Chud, did you not hear Demon Mama try to explain how I experience being non-binary?
That's what she did.
Am I the only one who heard that? Excuse me. Yes, you are literally the only one who heard that. You're the only one who heard that. You've been hearing what you want to hear. I asked you, how do you know that you're non-binary? And then you said, well, because I'm not a man or a woman. Yeah. And then I said, yeah, you identified that you're non-binary.
That's literally trying to explain what his experience is. Like, he said that, like, yeah, I look at the roles that, like, to be very specific. Like, he said, oh, I look at the different roles in society and I don't really feel like any of them are satisfying to me, or something along those lines. That's basically what he said. It's like, I look at the roles in society and I don't really feel satisfied by performing those roles. And then she's like, oh, so you don't self-identify with those roles, right? Like trying to shoehorn her idea of transness into what he was trying to explain his rationale was. Like that absolutely was trying to explain his experience with gender.
And you declared it, and we take it in good faith.
No, it's not just declaring it. Yeah, no. Again, you're doing that conflation thing between a practical application of language and the more important question of what the actual nature of gender is. I know you have a really tough time understanding the distinction between those two things, but they're actually really important.
Yeah.
And I'm not just going to let you gaslight me and pretend like I'm doing things that I'm
not. I'm a gaslighter. Oh, do you want to add anything else onto it? What else do you want? Do you want to call me like a murderer or anything else you want to add to the list?
Bro, you've been ad-homing at him this entire conversation.
Unless they're actually transphobic.
What? You know, I try not to ad-hom people as you literally walked in here
and
being
called
like,
you
you're too afraid
because you are a transphobe.
I'm not a transphobe.
Well, that's up for discussion, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that if you define me as a transphobe... What's that? I mean,
dear Lord.
I said that your argument was more transphobic by your own standards than mine.
But it's not.
By your
because
own
I misspoke and you wouldn't give me charitability.
No, not a matter of
explain what that meant.
On multiple occasions, you expressed the exact same argument, an argument that would, by its conclusion, define somebody as not what they say they are. You brought this up numerous times in this discussion.
Give me an example. I only did that once, and I clearly said that I was referencing a hypothetical.
Can I actually talk here? Because, like, you got your whole fucking rigmarole at the end, and now it's my turn, right?
Can I actually... I'm going to ask you... Wait, hold on. Did she...
So...
you invited me on.
3...
No, I...
Unless they're actually transphobic.
Oh, yeah. What? You know, I try not to ad-hom people as you literally walked in here
and
being like, you're too afraid...
because you are a transphobe.
I just have to re-listen to this 1 second.
Well, I would love that's up for discussion, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that if you define me as a transphobe... What's that? I mean, no, I said that your argument was more transphobic by your own standards than mine.
Because I misspoke and you wouldn't give me charitability.
No, not a matter of
explain what that meant.
On multiple occasions, you expressed the exact same argument, an argument that would, by its conclusion, define somebody as not what they say they are. You brought this up numerous times in this discussion.
Give me an example. I only did that once.
So my understanding of the argument as he made it was that we need to make sure, like, generally speaking, if you try to use a word in the way that it's not typically used, then you're using it, well, just by that, right? That you would be using a word, like, in a way where it's not conventionally being used. You know, if you were to say that, like, oh, being a woman is anyone who self-identifies as a woman, then as a descriptive matter, then we would acknowledge that, like, well, that's not the way that most people use the word. Like, that's what he said. As far as, like, I can remember what his argument was. Now it could be the case where if he doesn't recognize kind of like this intrinsic inclinations idea for like what makes someone that predisposes people towards behaviors that generally line up with gender roles in society, then it could be the case as like, oh, will you make it entirely based on social construct that you have to concede that like by other people's standards, how they use the word, that someone isn't actually a woman or a man. Like if you make it entirely based on social construction. But it seems like he agrees with the idea that there's some kind of underlying matter of the fact that exists for most people. Like he cited to like his family members and his friends, who wouldn't be captured by what she's saying. So it seems like he acknowledges this kind of other underlying matter of the fact. And I think that as long as he like acknowledges that and makes it like, no, this is like what we're primarily weighing when we're determining what is a certain gender, then he doesn't have to bite that bullet.
I clearly said that I was referencing a hypothetical.
Can I actually talk here? Because like you got your...
Rem's argument is that there are at least some people who claim womanhood or manhood who are in fact wrong about that. Well, I guess it depends if they, like to me, it would depend if they have those intrinsic inclinations. I'm going to weigh those incredibly high. So like if we use a family resemblance model, we were weighing different traits differently. That's going to be the thing that I primarily weigh, you know, in terms of like, is someone is like a certain gender, you know, if they have these intrinsic inclinations, which predispose us towards behaviors, which generally fit into like prototypical gender roles in society. because it's like if someone doesn't have those inclinations and otherwise performs femininity, well, I mean, like, especially if it's only temporary, we have a term for that, and it's drag queens, you know? Like, if someone doesn't have intrinsic inclinations towards more feminine expression, but they still perform womanhood, especially in, like, very temporary settings, maybe someone could draw a distinction there between, like, someone who performs, like, temporarily versus, like, habitually. But, like, that would be, like, a clear example of someone who doesn't have, like, intrinsic inclinations, which would predispose them towards generally what we would call, like, womanhood or manhood. But they would still perform womanhood, you know?
Whole fucking rigmarole at the end, and now it's my turn, right?
Okay.
Since you fucking came on here and interrupted my conversation originally. So,
like you invited me on.
Like, we would say that someone like Ryan Barnes was incorrect when she thought that she was a man during her attempt to transition, and Ryan would agree. Yeah, no, actually, like, as an example, it's like Ryan Barnes, like, pretty large, like, detransitioner on YouTube. Yeah, like, we would say that, like, they were wrong when they transitioned. And that's what Ryan would say. And we would agree with Ryan that, like, oh, you actually didn't have, like, the intrinsic inclinations which predispose you towards, like, the category of man generally. Maybe nowadays they identify as, like, non-binary or, like, woman, but, like, we would say that, like, in that case, like, yeah, they're wrong. An easier example is, like, if you have a, let's say, in the hypothetical, that you have a trans woman who knocks her head and has amnesia where all of her memory from the time that she had realized that she was trans up to the present was wiped from her memory, you know? And she now believed herself to be a man, right? In that case, would we have to say that this person is a man? And what we would say with an intrinsic inclination model is that, no, this is in fact a woman who has forgotten that she is a woman, you know? But Demon Mama's mama would have to conclude that, like, no, this is a man. That would be, like, that's another difference between the two, kind of the self-ID and what I'm, well, not even what I'm proposing. The relevant academic literature, right? But yeah, and that's the idea.
On.
No, I really didn't invite you on. I said just do it.
You did. You said to Chud, yeah, let's fucking bring him on. So let's not try to say I invaded.
I forgot. When somebody's like breathing in your window and looking at night, and you go, fine, come in here and let's sort this shit so you stop harassing me. Then that's inviting you into their house, man.
Yeah,
you must
I mean,
have a really
I think I have an obligation to call out what.
If someone's doing that, I'm calling the cops. I'm not inviting them into my house. What? Yeah, I guess. If someone's staring at my window, I'm not inviting them into my house. Fuck that. No, you invited them on. This is a really weird point. You don't need to fight on everything that he says. Like, chill.
I perceive to be like someone who is bad for trans people in the social sphere.
Transphobic murderer, demon mama, committed the Iraq war personally, did 9/11, add the rest of your unsubstantiated bullshit claims.
I think she has like a 1 for me.
What actually happened?
I don't know if I
like this is the most uncredible, unlikable performance I've ever seen from anyone. I shouldn't say, I'm being hyperbolic, from someone in a long time.
Into whatever pretzel you possibly can.
Like, this is amazing.
Like, oh no, I couldn't have been wrong. Me, the philosopher King Rem, I couldn't have been talking out of my ass, but you have been this entire time. You haven't.
Well, no, if you want, I can restate my argument in simpler terms for you, because you're obviously having trouble.
Excuse me, I'm not done yelling at you.
I'm not done, Mr. Philosopher.
Oh, sorry, was I interrupting you?
Argument.
Is that rude?
What is going on? This is becoming a circus. I mean, what?
I know. This is stupid now. Let's just bring in Joe. I've said this 5 times. Demon Mama just wants to have the last word. So, like, let's just have
core of your argument. The core.
Oh, you want my argument? Do you want me to reiterate?
No. Excuse me. I don't need you to reiterate anything. You've reiterated.
I don't need you to actually say what you're arguing. That would make it harder for me to call you a shitty, terrible person.
This is how it goes. You're not interested in learning. If you were interested in engaging with any of, if you were interested in engaging with any of these ideas, honestly, you wouldn't have started this by opening out by saying that I'm transphobic, and also you wouldn't have opened this by asserting the gender.
This is the same kind of, I'm sorry, this is like laughable. Like, oh, you aren't actually interested in engaging what I'm saying. Well, Demon Mama is like routinely just ignoring blatantly what he's saying. Also, I'm just going to toss this out there. Like, I am not saying she is a TERF. This is the exact same kind of shit that TERFs do, where it's like, oh, don't call me a TERF. And it's like, no, I'm just describing what you believe accurately, right? Like here, it's like Rem is just like accurately describing the outcomes of his worldview, or of Demon Mama, of her worldview, right? Like that is just as a descriptive matter what is happening here. So just like we wouldn't say that like, oh, you shouldn't, not call turfs turfs because like they don't like being called the bad thing, like here, like no, it's an accurate label. Wait, now she's arguing that's axiomatically impossible to be good faith with her if it involves criticizing her as transphobic. What? Yeah, literally.
Gender of somebody you've never even talked to, who you're about to talk to, which is going to be super interesting to see how you fucking
conversation with Doe goes over better, right?
Blogs of them saying they identify as a deer. So I actually have tweets of her of them saying that. I hope you have a lot of fun of it saying that.
I hope you're very good faith engagements and your super solid arguments about how I'm a transphobe and whatever other nonsense that you want to card out are super legitimate.
It's up to the audience to decide, right?
We don't have a panel here. Definitely not built on the most tenuous nonsense that I can possibly imagine, grossly and uncharitably interpreting every single thing that I said, and also heckling me until
everything she said. Like I swear, every other thing that she says is an ad hom.
Because you're starved for attention.
Posturing 100, yeah.
This is gonna drive those viewer numbers up, baby. I mean, come on. We know you love this. You fucking thrive on this.
Is this not like?
You could literally just block me, but it's funny that you never do. It's very interesting to me.
You could. The weird thing is that I didn't expect.
Why didn't you?
I mean, I did. Wait, why didn't I block you?
No, why didn't you block me? If I was fucking harassing you, you could block me. You'd never see me again. What's the issue?
Yeah, I mean, here we go. I'm gonna do that right now. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that thing right now, even though I was just complaining about how you were harassing me, and I could have done that before, even though I could have blocked you before.
People all the time, but you added me randomly this morning, and then you showed up, and I was here having an unrelated conversation.
And you
showed up
me on the call.
I brought you on because I'm tired of you, and now
I brought you.
Tired of me. We had the conversation. You should.
I brought you on to talk to you because I'm tired of dealing with you. So I'm going to deal with you for another 3 hours. Fam, like, I don't know what... I don't know how you could colossally fuck up a conversation this bad. Because Rem has done wonderfully. And not only does demonmama look like the biggest asshole ever coming out of this, but also she doesn't, like, I don't think that there's any person, I don't think that there is a single person who didn't already agree with her who would come out of this conversation otherwise agreeing with her after. Not a single person. Like, this is unfathomably bad. RGR, I'm tired of the stream, so I'm going to stick around over. Okay.
If you were that tired of me,
I think it's almost over. I'm pretty sure it seems like it's wrapping up.
So you're like, oh, come on. I'll let him come on. I'll fucking own him. And actually, you realize, oh, fuck. This is someone who knows what he's talking about. What the fuck am I going to do? I've got to throw out all these ad homs.
See, now now he's being like a little more aggressive. I think he's well earned it.
Go have a nap then. We can talk later, maybe.
What?
Are you feeling tired?
Are you hearing things again?
She said she was tired earlier.
I never said anything about being tired. I said you're rambling again.
Wait.
Okay.
Wait. Wait. Hold on. I never said anything about being tired. Wait a second. All right, we're going back a couple minutes. I'm sorry.
Very good.
It was a joke. All right. I'm just saying, like, it's not. It was a joke. All right. I'm just tired. It's just like when she says, I'm tired of you. And then immediately, and then he's like, oh, we'll go take a nap. And then she's like, what? I never say anything about being tired. Like, come on.
Bye.
Thanks for coming on. Wait. Okay. Listen. Sorry. Before you go, listen, Demon. Thank you. I know. Listen, Demon. Thanks for coming. Stop.
Oh, I couldn't switch the transcript.
Oh my fucking god. Right, Demon. Thanks for coming. No, stop. Thanks for coming on your day off. I really appreciate it. Okay. Okay, and I'm gonna let you go into the night and have a day off. And I'll drop you a line later. We'll play some Apex. Okay.
Yeah. Bye.
Is that it?
Okay,
cool.
So, are you ready to speak to Doe?
All right.
Yeah, sure.
That's it for that one.